Train stations are meant to connect places, but abandoned ones often hold something far darker. The echoes of lives left behind, footsteps that no longer exist, and whispers that linger long after the last train has departed. Across the United States, abandoned train stations have become hotspots for paranormal encounters haunted by travelers, conductors, and unseen entities who never left the platforms. Tonight, we explore 25 real ghost stories from abandoned train stations, where the past refuses to rest, and the tracks lead not to destinations, but to the unknown. Step carefully, listen closely, and keep your eyes open. Central Station in Cleveland, Ohio, once a grand transportation hub of the early 1900s, now stands as a shadow-filled monument to a different kind of traffic one that does not belong to the living. For decades, the station bustled with steam engines, hurried passengers, and countless stories penned into the brickwork of the platforms. Today, trains rarely stop here, and yet visitors claim the echoes of the past never left. Many come expecting an atmospheric historic site. Few are prepared for what they actually encounter. The first thing most visitors notice is the whistle. It begins faintly, like a distant call across the tracks, barely audible over the city noise outside. But once inside, the building's arch ceilings capture the sound and amplify it. The whistle doesn't belong to any functioning train, and no modern locomotive carries that pitch or tone. Some say the whistling arrives at the same hour every night. Others claim it sounds only when someone enters alone. Security guards report pausing mid-shift, hearing the unmistakable chuff of pistons and metal wheels rolling across tracks that have not seen a steam locomotive since before they were born. But sound is only the beginning. The platforms themselves host footsteps that never match the living. Visitors frequently stop, turning around to see who is walking behind Thema, only to find empty air. Some describe the sound as heavy boots. Others are clipped, precise tapping of heels from another era. A few have reported hearing the footsteps, keeping pace with them, before slowly fading into silence, as if the figure had turned into a corridor that no longer exists. One local man recalled walking along the main platform when he heard someone approach from behind, fast and urgent, as though he were late to catch a train. The footsteps continued forward, unbothered, until they stopped near the rusted gate where passengers once boarded outbound trains. The man watched in disbelief as the old gate swung slightly on its hinges, though there was no breeze and the heavy metal required effort to move. It is not just sound that haunts the bronze-tiled station floors. Shadows have been seen gliding across the walls, even when the corridor is still and the overhead lights are stable. Visitors report seeing figures dressed in early 20th century outfits, conductors in press uniforms, men in long coats and hats, women with traveling cases clasped tighter, looking around, and then disappearing straight into the wall as if passing through an invisible doorway leading to the past. Some claim the figures move with purpose, as though on their way to catch a train that never arrives. Others seem lost, staring at signs no longer posted, waiting for announcements that would never play again. Maintenance workers rarely stay alone. One recalled sweeping the near-silent eastern corridor when he spotted someone standing at the far end. He thought it was a fellow employee and called out to ask if the shift was over. The figure did not move. The worker squinted, realizing the man wore a dark overcoat and wide-brimmed not standard modern clothing. As the worker approached, the figure turned, revealing no face, only indistinct features lost in shadow, before stepping through the wall and vanishing. Paranormal investigators have taken more than passing interest in Central Station. Teams have set up night vision cameras, sound recorders, and electromagnetic sensors along the dormant tracks. Many walked away convinced that the station hosts far more than memories. One team captured glowing orbs gliding smoothly down the length of tracks, not jittering or reflecting like dust or insects caught in light, but moving with direction as though following an invisible locomotive's route. Several recordings contain faint voices, unintelligible but rhythmic, matching the cadence of distant conversation, as if passengers were discussing train schedules or waiting for departure announcements that have not sounded for decades. In one chilling video, A camera placed at the far south platform shows a misty form materializing momentarily near a rusted bench. The shape resembles a man sitting, leaning forward, elbows on knees, head lowered. Moments later, the form straightens, stands, and dissolves into a streak of light, moving across the platform and disappearing beyond the boundary of the frame. Locals believe the spirits are not restless, but attach a bound to schedules, destinations, and expectations that their final journeys never fulfilled. The station was once a vital artery of travel during wartime and industrial expansion. Many soldiers shipped out from here, some never returning home. Workers commuted daily. Immigrants arrived seeking new lives. Families said difficult goodbyes beneath the high steel ceilings. The building accumulated emotions across decades, and some of those energies seem imprinted on every worn stone and platform edge. Those who visit Central Station today may enter expecting a historic landmark, yet leave with a different understanding. The air inside is heavy with echoes, the walls carrying the weight of countless footsteps, voices, and lingering goodbyes. To walk through its halls is to move between two worlds to one visible, one lost but not silent. Phantom whistles call from tracks no longer used. Footsteps cross empty platforms. Shadowed passengers flicker into existence and vanish again, still waiting, still traveling, forever en route. Central Station remains a place where time never truly arrived or departed. It simply layered itself, allowing the living and the lost to share the same station, brief as a passing train in the night. Union Station in Tacoma, Washington, is a place where the present sits quietly on top of the past. And those who explore it after dark often discover that the past is not always silent. Built in the early 20th century, the station was once a proud gateway to the Pacific Northwest, alive with travelers, steam engines, and a constant rhythm of departures and arrivals. Today, its grand rotunda and echoing halls are admired for their architecture and history. But the building has another layer of one that becomes most visible when the sun goes down and the lights flicker across empty floors. Those who have ventured into Union Station late at night often recount an unsettling atmosphere that descends as soon as the doors close and the building settles. What should be just creaking beams and cooling pipes become something else here. Footsteps that are not their own, doors slamming when no breeze is present, and the strange, undeniable feeling of being watched. The most famous encounters center around a figure often seen walking the corridors. A man dressed in a conductor's uniform from an era long gone. Witnesses describe him as solid, real, and purposeful, as though he is on duty even now. He strides down the hallways with confidence, carrying himself with the authority of someone responsible for schedules, platforms, and hundreds of passengers. Yet when anyone approaches, calls out, or tries to follow, the figure vanishes into thin air. One group of urban explorers recounted seeing conductors standing near the deserted ticketing windows, posture stiff and hands clasped behind his back. He appeared to be reading a schedule board that has in a T displayed train times for decades. Thinking he was part of a historical reenactment troupe or perhaps a security guard in costume, they tried to speak with him. The man did not react. Instead, he turned, took several steps down the hall, and disappeared before their eyes just as the overhead lights flickered violently. The doors behind them slammed shut, sending echoes down the entire length of the hall. None of the group lingered long enough to see if the conductor reappeared. Security staff and renovation workers have amassed their share of stories as well. Many report doors opening and closing with no visible cause. The heavy ticket office doors, which are difficult to move even with effort, have been witnessed slamming with the force of an angry hand, even when the air is still and the building is otherwise quiet. One night, a guard doing his rounds stopped in front of the ticketing area after hearing what sounded like someone rummaging through papers and slamming drawers. The office lights flickered, then steadied. When he pushed open the glass door, he found the room empty. Before he could turn back, the door he had just entered slammed shut behind him so hard the wall vibrated. He stood in the dark, heart pounding, with nothing but the sound of his own breathing, until the lights slowly brightened again. The flickering lights are a common theme in many Union Station ghost accounts. Electricians and technicians have investigated the wiring numerous times and can find no consistent explanation. The lights dim and surge in patterns too deliberate to be random. They brighten when someone enters the hall and fade when that person steps closer to the abandoned ticket booths. Late-night explorers often report entire rows of lights flickering on as though welcoming their arrival, only to snap off just as quickly, leaving them standing in uneasy silence. The conductor, however, remains the most persistent presence. Over the years, dozens of people claim to have seen him walking with a steady pace as though checking the station eye's operations. Some have heard the faint sound of keys jingling at his hip. Others describe hearing the tapping of a pocket watch, as if he is dutifully marking time long after the need has passed. Those who have managed to get closer say his clothing is immaculately pressed vest, polished shoes, cap perfectly squarita, but his face is always difficult to see. Shadows cling to his features, no matter how much light is in the room. Some insist his eyes are the only clearly visible feature, wide and searching, as if he is still looking for a train or passenger that never arrived. Even the architecture seems to play a role in the haunting. A single tier reflects the candlelight. The long corridors invite wandering spirits, and the marble floors reflect just enough movement to trick the eye. One contractor working on renovation recalled seeing what he thought was another worker wheeling a luggage cart across the atrium. He turned to continue his task. But when he looked back, there was no one there. The building was locked, and he was the only person scheduled on shift. Those who believe in the paranormal suggest that Union Station's lingering spirits are tied to the emotional imprint left behind by thousands of tearful goodbyes, hopeful reunions, and anxious journeys. The conductor may have been a man who took great pride in maintaining the station eye's operation, someone who died with his duties incomplete. The slamming doors and flickering lights could be echoes of the station at its busiest, replaying fragments of activity long after the crowds have disappeared. Union Station today stands not just as a piece of Tacoma-esque history, but as a bridge between worlds. The marble floors no longer carry crowds of rushing passengers, yet footsteps still echo after dark. The ticket windows have long been shuttered, yet doors continue to slam as though impatient travelers are demanding service. And the conductor still walks, faithfully patrolling his station, forever ensuring a schedule that only he can see, disappearing whenever the living try to draw close. Michigan Central Station in Detroit, Michigan, has long stood as one of America's most recognizable symbols of abandonment, a towering monument of empty floors, broken windows, and memories trapped in its crumbling structure. Once a proud and bustling railway terminal, the station welcomed thousands of travelers a day, its grand waiting rooms filled with voices, footsteps, and the endless flow of life. When the last train rolled out in the late 20th century, the silence moved in, and with it came something else, something that never left. Those who step inside today, especially after dark, discover that the station eye's past is not as quiet as its shattered walls would suggest. The first thing most people notice is the sound. Michigan Central Station is famous for its echoes, but the echoes many hear do not come from their own footsteps. Visitors report standing in the vast waiting rooms, surrounded by peeled paint and dust-coated benches, when the unmistakable murmur of distant voices fades in from nowhere. At first, it sounds like a crowd whispering down a long hallway. Then the voices grow clearer, conversations layered over each other, snippets of laughter, arguments, hurried instructions about boarding times, and even the clatter of trunks being set on the floor. Many who hear these spectral conversations describe pausing, hoping to make out individual words. Some believe the voices come from a lingering imprint of the station eye's busiest era, a memory replaying itself endlessly through the ruins. Others swear they have heard the voices address them directly, a stern conductor calling out final boarding notices, a woman asking someone to wait, a child complaining about luggage too heavy to carry. The most unnerving part is that the voices always stop abruptly, as if whoever is speaking suddenly realizes they have been overheard. Echoes are only one piece of Michigan's Central Station IS haunted reputation. The apparitions seen here are as varied as the stories that created them. Paranormal investigators, urban explorers, and nighttime photographers have all claimed glimpses of figures moving through the abandoned corridors. Most witnesses describe seeing fleeting human shapes reflected in broken glass as shadows that step into view then vanish before a camera can focus. Sometimes the figures stand motionless, watching silently from the darkness. Other times they move quickly, as though running to catch a train that has not arrived in decades. One photographer recounted setting up a long exposure shot of the main concourse, hoping to capture the eerie geometry of the broken windows and cracked tiles. When the image developed, something unexpected appeared. In one shattered window, far above the floor, stood the faint silhouette of a man wearing a fedora. His face was turned toward the camera, though no one had been on the upper floors at the time. Another photographer, taking pictures near the grand staircase, glanced up and saw someone standing on the landing. The figure wore what looked like old travel clothing, a long coat, sturdy butsa, and was staring down as if waiting to see who was entering. The figure remained solid for several seconds before fading away into the shadows. Those who explore the station at night often report objects shifting with no visible source. Tripods are nudged out of alignment. Dust-coated debris slides across the floor as though someone unseen brushed past. Metal beams creak under weight that isn't there. One explorer placing a flashlight on an overturned bench turned away for a moment, only to hear it clatter from the floor. When he turned back, the bench itself had shifted several inches. Another visitor reported setting a water bottle on the stairs while adjusting his backpack. When he looked again, the bottle was sitting on the landing above Hema. Yet he had been alone the entire time. Even seasoned investigators admit that Michigan Central Station carries a heavy atmosphere. The building seems to breathe with the energy of millions who pass through its doors. The long hallways and cavernous rooms hold more than dust and decay. They hold the weight of expectation, farewells, reunions, and untold stories. Some speculate that the spirits remain because they never left in life. Others believe the station acts as a doorway, a place where echoes of time overlap, and the past can be felt just as clearly as the present. Construction workers and restoration crews have had their own encounters. During renovations, workers reported hearing footsteps on upper floors when no one was supposed to be there. Tools left neatly stacked at the end of one shift were scattered the next morning. Elevators long out of service made groaning noises, as if someone inside was trying to operate them. One worker swore he heard a man-ass voice behind him whisper, "A time to board A." When he turned, the hall was empty, but the sound of rolling train wheels echoed faintly in the distance. The station's massive windows create some of the eeriest sightings of all. From the outside, photographers and curious onlookers have watched silhouettes shift behind glass that no longer exists. Figures appear standing still, as if waiting for the next train, only to vanish when someone tries to get closer. The effect is so consistent that some claim the station is still occupied, just not by the living. Many believe Michigan Central Station has become a living memorial, one that refuses to fade. Every whisper through the concourse, every shadow crossing a broken doorway, every object moved by unseen hands speaks to a past that never shut its doors. The travelers who once filled the station may have departed the world, but not the building that housed their hopes, fears, and final goodbyes. Night after night, the station comes alive again, filled with echoes of people who still wait for trains. That will never return, leaving Michigan Central Station forever caught between what once was and what remains. Old Richmond Station in Virginia stands as a relic of the past, a red brick terminal that once served as one of the busiest transport gateways in the region. In its prime, it was alive with steam engines, mothers calling after children, luggage carts rattling over platform, and a constant shuffle of hurried commuters. Today, the station is quieter, preserved as a historic site rather than a functional rail yard, but that silence is deceptive. Those who walk its platforms after closing hours or work the night shifts know that something still moves through the station. Something that does not belong to this time or this world. From a very first step inside, many visitors report a noticeable change in temperature. Warm summer evenings outside mean little once someone crosses the threshold of the old station. Pockets of air grow suddenly cold, sharp enough to raise goosebumps and visible enough to send breaths crystallizing in front of startled faces. Maintenance staff say the cold spots appear in the same area between the waiting room benches, beside the eastern platform doors, and near the old ticket booth where hundreds once lined up each morning. The chill feels intentional, as if someone unseen is standing too close, watching and waiting. The temperature alone wounded have made Old Richmond Station infamous. That came when the living realized they were not alone. One night shift security guard, working the station in early autumn, heard footsteps along the main platform long after the last visitor had left. The station was locked, alarms armed, and he was alone. Yet the sharp echo of dress shoes on stone floors rang out, moving steadily from one end of the platform to the other. Thinking that perhaps a late visitor had been missed, he followed the sound only to discover that no one was there. The footsteps stopped suddenly as he turned the corner, and a moment later, they began again behind him. He fled back to the lobby, where the lights flickered as if in mock applause. He never returned to the night shift. Phantom footsteps are among the most common reports. Staff hear them pacing through the upstairs offices, walking down staircases that have been blocked off for decades, or prowling behind them in the waiting hall. Some footsteps are slow and deliberate, like someone searching for a lost platform. Others are rushed and frantic, like a late passenger desperate to catch a train that hasn't arrived in 50 years. If the footsteps are unnerving, the sights reported are even more unforgettable. Visitors and staff alike describe seeing phantom passengers waiting calmly on platforms of men in old traveling coats, women clutching handbags or weaving gloved fingers together, children holding lunch tins and paper-wrapped packages. They appear on benches that have been used in decades, seated with perfect posture, gazes fixed straight ahead, as though they are prepared to board a train that is just moments away. One elderly couple touring the station at dusk claimed they saw 5 people in period clothing sitting quietly on an old bench. Assuming they were part of a historical reenactment or museum setup, they walked closer. The figures never turned their heads, never shifted or moved. Then, just as the couple stepped within a few feet, the passengers flickered like candle flames in a sudden draft and disappeared entirely. The bench sat empty, worn, and dusty, with no indentations on the seat and no sign of anyone having been there. Reports like that are common enough that long-time workers simply shrug and say, "A Thea waiting for a train today." And that is where the station's most chilling phenomenon comes in, the arrival of a train that never comes. Late at night, when wind rattles old window frames and the city lights glow faintly through stained glass, people inside Old Richmond Station have heard the unmistakable approach of a steam locomotive. The sound begins faintly, the deep, pounding chug of metal pistons and the slow grind of wheels rolling over tracks. Grows louder, closer, as if an enormous engine is pulling into the station. Some claim to hear the distant blast of a whistle, the hissing release of steam pressure, even the clang of couplers and the squeal of brakes. Those brave enough to step onto the empty platform during these moments stand in silence, listening to a train that should be Visiblia, but isn't. One custodian described standing outside on the western platform when the sound grew deafening. He heard voices of dozens of Thema talking, laughing, arguing, shouting goodbyes. The platform lights flickered to life, even though the power had been shut off hours earlier. Then, as suddenly as it began, everything stopped. The station returned to silence. But the custodian swears he saw a cloud of steam drifting across the tracks before fading into the night. Paranormal investigators have visited Old Richmond Station many times, hoping to capture the mysterious noises or phantom figures. Audio devices have recorded distant conversations in empty rooms. Cameras have filmed shadows moving between pillars. Thermal equipment has detected sudden temperature drops, sometimes in perfect human shape standing beside doors or sitting on benches. Some believe the spirits remain because the station represents a powerful emotional ancora, a place of departures and reunions, tears and relief, excitement and heartbreak. Perhaps those imprints became permanent, looping endlessly in the walls of the building. Others think the station is stuck halfway between worlds, neither entirely abandoned nor entirely alive. A portal in which echoes of the past bleed into the present. Whatever the truth, Old Richmond Station remains a place where time never fully moved on. Phantom passengers still wait for trains that never pull in. Footsteps continue along empty floors. Cold spots hover, where people once stood in anxious expectation. And long after the rails fell silent, the station itself refuses to be forgotten. Denver Union Station in Colorado is still a thriving transit hub on the surface, but hidden away in its forgotten basements, sealed tunnels, and abandoned maintenance corridors is another world entirely one that belongs not to commuters and tourists, but to echoes of the past. These lower sections, closed off decades ago and rarely visited except by authorized personnel or daring explorers, retain the former soul of the station. Down here, the air is heavy with dust and history, the walls still stained by steam, oil, and the rhythm of an era long gone. It is in these forgotten passages that the paranormal claims are strongest, and those who enter them often leave with stories they never expected to tell. Many who have descended into the old sections beneath Denver Union Station speak first of the silence. It is not the peaceful quiet one finds in an empty house or an abandoned street, but a thick, tense stillness that feels as if something is listening. And then, within that stillness, things begin to happen that defy explanation. One of the most commonly reported sightings is that of a conductor, a tall man in a press uniform, cap squared on his head, posture straight as a rail. Explorers say he appears not in dramatic flashes, but simply is there, standing in the middle of a hallway as though he has been there all along. His presence is solid and real, as though he could be approached and spoken to, yet the illusion never lasts. Those who attempt to walk toward him find that with every step, he grows less defined until he fades completely into the shadows. Others say the conductor turns and walks away, only to vanish around a corner that leads nowhere. One pair of urban explorers recounted standing in a long, dusty corridor where rusted pipes snaked across the ceiling. They were halfway through setting up a camera when a figure appeared at the far end of the hall. The man wore what looked like a vintage railroad uniform, his hands behind his back, chin up as if inspecting the station. The explorers whispered to each other, the silence amplifying their fear. The conductor turned slowly, and their flashlights caught a brief reflection off what may have been brass buttons. Then he began to walk toward them. They stood rooted to the ground, too stunned to run. But before he reached them, the lights in the hallway flickered and went out. When their flashlights steadied again, the conductor was gone. Visual sightings are only one part of the lingering activity. Sound plays a major role in the hauntings of the abandoned sections. Several people have sworn that they heard train announcements echo over speakers that have not functioned in years. In still empty rooms, the metallic ring of old speaker systems flickers on, followed by muffled, formal-sounding announcements of platform numbers, track assignments, boarding calls. Sometimes the words are clear enough to distinguish. Other times they blend into an indistinct monotone, like someone speaking through a wall. The most unsettling detail is that the announcements always describe trains that no longer exist at departures long erased from schedules, trains that last ran generations ago. One nighttime maintenance worker reported hearing the loud crackle of a speaker overhead while sweeping dust near an old loading area. The station was closed, the hallway sealed off from the public. Then a warm, authoritative voice spoke. A train departing. All final passengers on board A. The worker stared up at the dead speaker box in disbelief. Before he could react, he heard the rumbling clatter of wheels and the hiss of steam from somewhere beyond the walls. The sound lasted several seconds before fading into stone and leaving only silence behind. Paranormal investigators who have obtained permission to explore these spaces have collected evidence of their own. EVP Devasisa, recorders used to capture unexplained audio, often return with sounds no one heard in the moment. On multiple sessions, investigators picked up the unmistakable rumble of a train pulling into a station, even though no tracks in that section have been active for decades. Others captured fragments of conversation, hurried instructions, farewells, and voices that seemed to echo the emotional weight of travel. One recording contained a low male voice saying, "A we relate, a," while another captured what sounded like a conductor shouting, "A all aboard, a." Some believe that the residual energy of Coloradoa rail history is stamped into the very foundation of Denver Union Station. These underground rooms once witnessed thousands of soldiers leaving for war, workers commuting daily, families separating or reuniting, and generations of travelers moving through the gateway of the West. The emotional charge of all those moments may have imprinted themselves so deeply that they replay long after the physical events have vanished. Other theories are more unsettling. A few paranormal researchers think the conductor seen in the abandoned halls might not be a residual tape loop of history, but an intelligent spirit of a presence still walking his route, still fulfilling duties he never abandoned in life. Such spirits, according to believers, remain because they do not realize time has moved on. They stay because they have a job to finish, a responsibility they refuse to abandon even in death. And in the silent tunnels beneath Denver Union Station, that sense of duty seems alive and well. The abandoned chambers are not large, but they carry a sense of vastness that does not relate to their physical dimensions. When walking through these quiet passages, many say they feel surrounded, as if Summonia or many Summonisas stand just out of sight. Cold drafts pass without any source. Shadows move where no light falls. Footsteps echo from empty rooms. And in the thick darkness of the far corners, some swear they feel the weight of eyes watching them, assessing them, silently passing judgment. Today, Denver Union Station above ground is full of polished floors, bustling restaurants, and modern travelers. But beneath, in its forgotten skeleton, another world waits. A world where a conductor still walks his beat. Announcements broadcast for passengers who never arrive. And the sounds of trains echo for ears that do not belong to the living. The abandoned sections serve as a reminder that though time moves forward, sometimes the past refuses to let go, continuing its schedule on tracks that no longer exist, watched over by a spirit who never left the station. Grand Central in Chicago, Illinois, once stood as a brilliant jewel of early American rail travel, a station that welcomed thousands of passengers every day. Its soaring archways and ornate structure made it one of the most recognizable railway terminals in the Midwest. But time has its way of shifting priorities, and as rail travel declined, large portions of the station fell into disuse. By the time the last sections closed, much of the once bustling complex had gone dark or locked away from the public. And forgotten by all except maintenance workers, urban explorers, and those who believe the echoes of the past never truly die. Because behind those sealed doors and silent passageways, something remains. And it is not silent at all. In the deserted wings of Grand Central, where light barely filters through cracked skylights, and dust hangs unmoving in the air, travelers still seem to rush for trains that no longer exist. Those who have slipped insidia or been unlucky enough to work the night shift to tell stories that defy logic and rattle even hardened skeptics. They speak first of the luggage sounds. In the middle of a silent hallway, one might suddenly hear the faint rumble of suitcase wheels rolling across tile. The sound grows stronger, not like a memory or a distant echo, but as though Summonia many Summonisa are passing right by. But no one is there. The sound goes on for several seconds, then fades into stillness, as if a ghostly crowd has boarded a train only they can see. One maintenance worker recalled inspecting a power junction deep below the platforms late one night. The air was still and thick with the scent of iron and disuse. He crouched near a metal panel when he heard rolling wheels behind him. Thinking a co-worker was approaching with equipment, he turned and called out. No answer. The wheels rolled right past him. He felt a brush of air against his leg, and the hairs on his arms stood up. When he shined his flashlight down the hall, the passage was completely empty. He packed up and never returned to that section alone again. Shadows are just as common in the abandoned spaces of Grand Central. These are not the ordinary plays of darkness where a flashlight beam or hallway light catches old metal beams. Witnesses often see shadows shaped like people moving along platforms, standing near staircases, or pacing beside the old maintenance rooms. Some appear solid, like silhouettes filled with life. Others are transparent and mist-like, drifting silently across brick walls before vanishing into corners that should hold nothing but dust. One urban explorer described sneaking in with a friend, only to freeze as they saw a tall figure standing at the far end of the platform. The figure wore what looked like a long traveling coat and hat, posture rigid and alert. The friends aimed their flashlights at the figure just as it began to move, but the light passed straight through it, revealing a staircase behind. The figure then walked forward, one purposeful step at a time, and dissolved midway across the platform. Both explorers bolt, their footsteps echoing through spaces that seem to hold more than the living. Perhaps the most striking reports involve ghostly travelers waiting for trains that will never arrive. People have seen figures seated on cracked benches, their forms flickering like old film projections. Women in long coats and gloves, men clutching briefcases, children with satchels, all sitting perfectly still as though waiting for the final call to board. No one has ever heard them speak, but investigators have described a pressure in the air around these apparitions, as if time itself is holding its breath. When approached, the figures vanish, leaving only the empty benches behind. Then there are the lights. Grand Central forgotten tracks once roar with locomotives, engines blasting steam, sparks flying from metal wheels. Now they lie dark and silent, or so one would think. Many who have ventured into the sealed tunnels describe seeing lights in the distance, glowing faintly like the headlamps of oncoming trains. The glow is unmistakable around, bright, and moving steadily down the tracks. Some say the phantom train never reaches them. The light flickers out before it gets close. Others claim the light passes right by, sweeping over walls and rails before disappearing into thin air without a sound. A few have heard the mechanical grind of engines along with the lights, the low rumble of wheels, the rhythmic clank of couplings, the sigh of pressure valves releasing steam. A former night guard once shared his experience of walking past the sealed lower platforms during his rounds. He heard a faint metallic rumble and assumed the noise came from a passing freight train outside. But the noise was below him, not outdoors. The tracks under the station hadn't seen a train in decades. He peered through a barred doorway and saw a faint white light, gliding along the darkness of an abandoned track. It drew closer, illuminating chipped tiles and rusted rails, until suddenly it vanished. The silence afterward was more unsettling than the sound itself. Paranormal investigators who have studied the site believe the hauntings may be tied to the powerful emotional energy of countless travelers who passed through Grand Central at its peak. The station was a launch point for soldiers heading to deployment, families relocating across the country, workers chasing opportunity, and loved ones saying tearful goodbyes. These moments carry so much weight that perhaps the walls soaked them in. Maybe the station became a spiritual loop, playing memories over and over in the vacant corners that history forgot. Others theorize that some spirits simply never realized the train stopped running. They still gather on platforms, still watch for arrivals, still roll luggage across floors, and still follow schedules written in a time that no longer exists. To them, Grand Central is as alive as ever. Today, the abandoned sections remain inaccessible to the public, and perhaps that is for the best. In the underground corridors and sealed-off platforms of Grand Central Chicago, the past never stopped moving. Ghostly passengers still wait. Footsteps still echo. Phantom trains still glide through tunnels the living can no longer enter. And the shadows, always just ahead or just behind, remain forever motionless, caught between eras, between worlds, and between destinations they will never reach. The Santa Fe Depot in San Diego, California, stands as one of the city's most recognizable historic landmarks, but once the sun drops behind the Pacific and the crowds disperse, shadows spill across the Spanish Revival arches, the once busy waiting halls fall silent, and the residual energy of over a century of travelers seems to rise from the walls. Generations of workers and nighttime explorers have recorded unsettling experiences within the depot as aging corridors of phantom footsteps, unexplained whispers, and sightings of figures dressed in early 20th century clothing who vanish before anyone can get close. Some long-time employees accept the hauntings as part of the station's personality. Others refuse to stay in the building after closing. Security guards making their nightly rounds have reported hearing the clicking sound of shoes crossing the old tile floors, as though a line of passengers were hurrying to meet a train no longer on the schedule. When he entered the old ticketing foyer, expecting a trespasser, he found the room empty, the booths dark, and the air noticeably cooler than the rest of the building. The booths dark, and the air noticeably cooler than the rest of the building. He would later confess that he had the strange sensation of being watched, though every corner remained vacant. Stories like his are not uncommon, and many who walked the halls alone after midnight felt the same pressure on the air, as if the depot itself were holding its breath. The phantom ticket collector is one of the most frequently seen apparitions. Witnesses describe a tall man with a neatly pressed uniform, cap shining as though freshly polished. He walks with purpose, his eyes scanning the crowd that no longer exists. Explorers who have seen him say he often raises a small brass punch, as if preparing to check someone's ticket, before abruptly fading into the air like smoke. A photographer attempting a nighttime-long exposure once captured a blurred streak of light, where the figure appeared to stand, even though the hall was empty. The man insisted that he had an overwhelming sense of copyright déjà vu, as though he were standing in the station a century earlier, when crowds still filled the platforms and the sound of steam engines echoed to the depot's soaring arches. The platforms themselves are no less active. One winter evening, 2 maintenance workers were repairing lights near the tracks, when they heard footsteps approaching from behind. Believing a supervisor had come to check on them, they turned, only to see no one. Several seconds later, the rhythmic echo of walking continued, this time passing directly between them and moving down the abandoned length of the platform. The rhythmic echo of walking continued, this time passing directly between them and moving down the abandoned length of the platform. The men remained frozen, listening as the sound diminished step by step, fading into the silent dark. Neither finished their work that night. One returned the next day to find his ladder lying on its side far from where he had left it. Visitors have reported whispers floating through the empty waiting areas, soft and indistinguishable, as if dozens of people were speaking quietly at once. One paranormal research team spent hours recording audio along darkened corridors where footsteps had been heard. When reviewing their findings, they discovered short bursts of sound, what seemed to be old-fashioned station announcements, spoken in clipped, formal tones. None of the investigators remembered hearing the announcements during the session itself. The team later returned to the depot, hoping to replicate the recordings, but on that occasion heard nothing except the creaking of wooden benches and distant traffic from the city outside. Cameras have captured orbs drifting along walls, moving deliberately through the air rather than reflecting random dust. One video taken near the rear entrance shows several distinct spheres gliding upward and disappearing into the ceiling arch. Another recorded near the old baggage area captured a translucent shape hovering briefly before dissolving. Though skeptics dismiss such evidence as digital artifacts, those who have spent late nights inside the depot often believe otherwise. Many attest that the building has palpable energy, stronger in some rooms than others, especially near the locked service corridor, where employees say they never feel alone. Some of the eeriest reports come from the old baggage room. Workers have said that, late at night, The metal conveyor belts rattle and shift as though heavy trunks were being dragged across them, even though the machinery has not been functional for decades. One former employee claimed he heard the unmistakable drop of a wooden suitcase, followed by wheels rolling across the floor. When he ran around the corner, flashlight in hand, the room was empty and still. The man left his shift early and quit within the week. Even those who approached the station from outside described strange sensations. Several pedestrians crossing nearby streets late at night have heard the faint sound of train whistles drifting through the air, even though no train was scheduled, and the sound carried a distinctly older tone, like the whistle of a long-retired steam locomotive. One passerby swore he saw the silhouette of passengers on the platform waiting beneath the depot lights. When he blinked, the figures vanished, replaced only by empty benches and drifting night fog. For some, the Santa Fe Depot is simply an architectural treasure, a reminder of the golden era of rail travel. For others, it remains a place where time folds strangely, where echoes of the past refuse to be silent, and where travelers who never caught their final train still roam the platforms, waiting for a departure that will never arrive. Old Union Station in Kansas City, Missouri, has stood for over a century, its towering facade and massive halls once filled with the sound of thousands of travelers moving to the heart of America. Today, the station is a restored landmark, but deep within its older corridors and forgotten wings, stories linger that do not appear on any official tour. Former workers, researchers, and late-night explorers speak of eerie encounters that suggest passengers and staff from long ago never truly left. Their presence is felt in the form of shadowy figures darting through dim corridors, the phantom clank of train wheels rolling down tracks long removed, and voices calling out from rooms that remain empty and silent in the physical world. Security guards have perhaps the widest collection of encounters. Many refuse to walk certain corridors alone at night, particularly the ones that run behind the former baggage rooms and mechanical areas. The reports often begin the same way: a guard walking his shift, flashlights sweeping across the walls, only to hear heavy footsteps running along the tile floors nearby. The sound is urgent, like someone desperately late for a departing train. When the guards round the corner to investigate, expecting trespassers, they find only stillness and shadows. One guard described hearing the distinct jingle of keys and a hurried breath just inches from his shoulder, before turning and seeing nothing but the long, empty hall stretching behind him. Motion sensors have triggered on multiple occasions in sealed rooms or locked wings, prompting guards to review the security feed. The footage often shows movementa, something crossing to the camera frame, a sudden blur, or a shifting distortion, yet no person ever appears in the video. One clip frequently whispered about among staff shows a dark humanoid shape moving behind a ticket counter. The shape seemed to stand still for several seconds before slipping downward, as if disappearing into the floor. The hallway lights flickered immediately afterward, though no power issue was recorded. The phantom runners are the most commonly reported figures, quick, long-legged shadows that dart from one corridor to another. Some appear almost childlike in size, while others seem as tall as full-grown adults. People who witness them often describe the same chilling detail. The shadows seem aware of being observed. One late-night maintenance employee recounted seeing a figure sprint across the loading corridor, but then stop halfway and slowly turn to face him. The worker felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as though the figure was studying him before vanishing into the wall. He refused to work alone afterward. Trains that no longer run also seem to echo inside the grand building. Workers have heard the rhythmic clank and grind of wheels rolling across tracks, followed by the hiss of brake steam, even though the platforms outside were dark and silent. A historical researcher investigating the station after hours once stood near a service staircase when she heard a conductor's whistle pierce the air sharp, commanding, and unmistakably close. She froze, waiting for voices, movement, or passengers. Instead, she heard the muffled call of a man shouting, "A boarding now," in a tone from another era. When she reached the platform, it was empty, illuminated only by flickering overhead bulbs and the faint hum of the city outside. in the upper offices, where clerks once logged schedules and personnel assignments. Voices often carry through the air even when the rooms are locked. Several employees working after closing have heard conversations, full sentences, murmurs, and sometimes laughter coming from a floor above them. The voices often sound as though they belong to men and women from the early 20th century, speaking quickly and professionally, though none of the words are fully distinguishable. One staff member climbed the stairs to confront what he assumed was unauthorized use of the offices. When he reached the landing, the voices went silent instantly. The hallway was cold enough that he could see his breath, and the doors to every room were locked from the outside. Visitors touring the station during quieter hours have experienced strange sensations as well. Some reported feeling a sudden temperature drop as they walked through the century-old corridors. Others described a sudden awareness of being watched, or the impression that someone was standing behind them only to find the hallway completely empty. A group of architecture students touring the basement level once heard someone whisper, "Hurry, the train is leaving." They claimed the whisper came from directly beside them, though no one was there. One student turned in time to see a shadow move quickly across the corridor, before disappearing through a solid brick wall. One of the most unsettling accounts came from an elderly man visiting the station for nostalgic reasons. He had passed through Union Station often as a young soldier departing for deployment in World War II. While waiting in one of the quieter halls, he suddenly heard the distinct sound of marching butsa, 2 rows of footsteps moving in perfect unison. The sound grew louder before fading into silence. The man, visibly shaken, told staff that the sound was identical to the troops who had once marched through the station in the 1940s. Some of the most dramatic evidence comes not from stories, but from the security footage that staff sometimes review late at night. One recording shows a heavy service door slamming shut with great force, despite no drafts, no movement, and no visible source. Another camera captured a set of papers sliding across a desk, without anyone touching them. The janitor who found them later claimed that the employee who once worked in that room died at Union Station decades ago. Old Union Station has been polished, renovated, and reopened to the public, but beneath the modern lighting and restored surfaces lies a deep reservoir of historia, some of which still walks its corridors. The shadows that run through the halls, the whispers that echo in empty rooms, and the phantom trains that still seem to arrive in the dead of night, serve as powerful reminders that the past is not always silent, and some travelers never truly reach their final destination. Old Pittsburgh Station in Pennsylvania once stood as a proud gateway to the industrial heart of America, where thousands of travelers poured through its doors daily, rushing to trains that would carry them across the country. Those who enter after dark report experiences that suggest time has not fully abandoned the building. Though the world moved on and much of the station sits quiet now, its long platforms and echoing halls seem far from empty. Shadows of commuters appear along the platforms, phantom footsteps sound behind visitors in deserted corridors, and faint conversations play out in the air with no physical speakers. Paranormal investigators and curious explorers alike have found themselves confronting an invisible residue of lives that once pulsed through the station like electricity. The earliest reports came from maintenance workers who stayed late to clean and repair the platforms. One man, who spent decades working the old station, claimed that nearly every night he heard the sound of footsteps keeping pace behind him as he walked the long stretch between platforms. He would turn to find nothing but still air and the dim glow of old lamps reflecting off tile floors. At first, he assumed it was his imagination or the building settling, but the footsteps grew more distinct over the years. They no longer sounded like echoes of his own steps. They sounded purposeful, belonging to someone walking directly behind him. Sometimes they stopped abruptly when he turned. Other times, they continued past him and down the platform, fading slowly into silence. A pair of station volunteers cleaning display cases once saw the figure of a woman standing near the old arrival sign. She appeared dressed in early 20th century clothing, clutching a handbag with both hands. The volunteers later recalled they heard no footsteps as she passed them, nor any voice as she moved her lips as though speaking. When they turned fully to face her, she faded into the wall behind the sign, leaving only a sudden coldness in the air. Both women left their shift early that night and refused afterward to work alone. Many modern visitors have reported similar experiences while walking the platforms. Some describe glancing up to see lines of ghostly commuters silently waiting, dressed in suits, dresses, and hats that belong to a different era. A high school teacher chaperoning a student photography group swore she saw several people grouped near a column on the furthest platform. She assumed they were part of her group until she realized they were transparent and motionless, staring down the tracks as though awaiting a train that would never arrive. Paranormal investigation teams who visited the station in recent years recorded multiple instances of cold spots of sudden drops in temperature that appeared in specific areas, usually where visual sightings were reported most often. One team described entering the old ticketing hall, where the air temperature dropped from mild room temperature to icy cold in the span of 2 steps. Their equipment confirmed the anomaly, and several members felt something brush past them, even though the room was empty. Moments later, one of their digital recorders picked up a whisper. "A donut tea missed the morning train, A." Though the voice was faint, all members agreed it sounded male, urgent, and spoken in an accent common decades ago. Investigators have also captured what appear to be EPSA electronic voice phenomena within the station's deserted rooms. In one recording, taken near a bench on the longest platform, an indistinct conversation plays in the background. A man's voice seems to ask, "Is the line running?" While another responds with something difficult to decipher, though the tone suggests routine conversation, as though 2 commuters were discussing a delayed departure. Another EVP, recorded inside a narrow corridor behind the main waiting room, contains a brief but chilling voice that clearly says, "A donut tea walk alone today." The voice did not belong to any investigator present, and was spoken in a whisper that none of them remembered hearing at the time. Supernatural encounters are not limited to sounds or cold spots. Several people have reported feeling the sensation of brushing shoulders with invisible figures while walking past rows of empty seats, as though squeezing their way through a crowd that no longer exists in physical form. A local historian conducting a late-night photographic survey claimed she felt someone gently tug the sleeve of her coat. She turned sharply, expecting to chastise a student or assistant, but instead found herself staring into an empty hall. The fabric of her coat sleeve showed the slight crease of a recent pull, as though held between fingers that never left a fingerprint. One of the most unnerving reports came from a security guard conducting a routine late-night check. As he walked through the station, he saw a small group of men with suitcases standing near the schedule board, silent and motionless. Thinking they were loiterers, he approached to ask them to leave. Before he came within 5 steps, the group vanished entirely, leaving no footprints on the dust-covered tiles and no sign they had ever existed. The guard later said the strangest part was not the disappearancia. It was the fact that he had heard their faint breathing as he approached, just as one would expect from living men. Visitors who step into the old Pittsburgh station today may find nothing but majestic ceilings, old benches, and the whisper of history drifting through the building. But those who stay long after the last daylight has faded might hear the murmur of voices from decades before, the clatter of train wheels rolling along tracks no longer used, and the footsteps of passengers who still walk their journey, in a place where time has never fully moved on. The old Salt Lake City Depot in Utah stands as a relic of the golden age of rail travel, its architecture dignified, and its high ceilings echoing the memories of journeys once begun beneath its ornate roof. Though modern trains no longer depart with the same intensity as they once did, the energy of the past still lingers. Staff and late-night workers maintain that the depot is far from silent after the last visitor has left. Reports continue to accumulate of figures in conductor uniforms pacing across the polished floors. Passengers dressed in early 20th century clothing waiting in lines that no longer exist. and a distinct clang of bells and train whistles sounding through the empty halls. Maintenance workers often encounter the first signs that they are not alone. For those who have spent time in the depot after closing, the building feels alive, frozen between the present and its long, bustling past. One of the custodians, who cleaned the depot for more than a decade, explained that nearly every night he would hear the sharp ring of a brass train bell echoing through the station. At first, he assumed a nearby clock or mechanical system was responsible. But the sound was inconsistent, sometimes loud, sometimes faint, sometimes ringing twice, sometimes once. On a particularly quiet winter night, he heard the bell and followed the sound toward the main platform. He expected to find a speaker malfunction, or perhaps teenagers playing a prank. Instead, he found an empty, unmoving platform bathed in dull yellow light. The bell rang again, this time right behind him, though no one was there. He left immediately, locking his cleaning cart inside the building and finishing his shift in the office rather than return to the platform. The apparitions seen within the depot are remarkably consistent. Staff describe a tall, stern man in a conductor uniform, complete with brass buttons, pocket watch, and cap. He walks briskly along the ticketing corridor, glancing at the large station clock as though checking departure schedules. Employees who have crossed paths with him note that he does not acknowledge their presence. He seems absorbed in some task from long ago. One evening, a new employee carrying paperwork down the hall watched the conductor pass directly in front of him before rounding the corner. When she turned the corner, the hallway was empty. The sound of faint footsteps faded gradually down the corridor until finally falling silent. Passengers from another era appear just as frequently. A station guide giving a private tour before closing paused when she noticed a woman standing alone near one of the benches. The guide greeted her, but received no response. When the guide stepped closer, the woman-S form began to fadilla first her hat, then her suitcase, then the outline of her body, until she vanished completely. The guide completed the tour, but never again stayed in the depot after dark. Another recurring sight is a crowd of silent commuters standing in the waiting area. Their clothing reflects early 1900s fashion men with vests and pocket watches, women with long skirts and gloves. Witnesses say these figures look solid for a moment, passing quickly into existence, only to dissolve like mist seconds later. One night, a security guard reviewing a late shift patrol video captured several blurred silhouettes standing near the benches. The camera showed the guard walking right through them, without noticing their presence. The temperature on the thermal camera dropped sharply in the area where the figures appeared, even though the Bodinga-S heating system was consistent throughout the night. The sounds of the station are just as unsettling as its figures. Train whistles have been heard at all hours of the night, shrill and urgent. The whistles do not resemble modern horns. They sound older, air-driven, echoing with a harsh metallic undertone characteristic of steam locomotive whistles. Staff ascending the main staircase have heard the low rumble of engines idling, followed by the rhythmic chug of pistons building speed. These sounds travel through the building despite the fact that there are no operational engines on the tracks. One night, a pair of longtime employees were closing the main hall when they heard the deep, vibrating hum of a train pulling into the platform. The windows trembled slightly, as they once did decades earlier when massive steam trains approached. They walked to platform doors expecting to see a train-S headlights cutting through the night. Instead, they found only still tracks and the quiet hum of city traffic in the distance. Paranormal investigators visiting the depot have recorded EVPs of faint conversations, as though passengers are discussing delays, schedules, and trips ahead. One recording captured a clipped male voice saying, "Next departure, track 2. Another session recorded the soft murmur of multiple voices, difficult to distinguish but clearly engaged in conversation. The investigators reported feeling cold spots throughout the waiting hall, especially near the benches where many historical sightings occur. One member felt a tap on his shoulder during a recording session, but when he turned, everyone else was across the room. Those who believe in haunting suggest the depot holds emotional residuia, a memory of thousands of goodbyes, reunions, and hurried departures. For generations, families parted here, some never to see one another again. Soldiers left for war. New immigrants arrived in search of futures they couldn't yet imagine. The station bore witness to countless private stories, many filled with hope, fear, and the weight of change. Today, while modern travelers pass through and staff continue their work, echoes of that earlier world remain. Late at night, when footsteps echo through the vast halls, when bells ring and whistles blow across empty platforms, one can almost imagine the train still running, the crowd still gathering, and the depot fully alive in the era it refuses to let go. The St. Louis terminal in Missouri, once one of the busiest transportation hubs in the Midwest, has long stood as a testament to the golden age of rail travel. Its grand arches, soaring ceilings, and sprawling platforms once welcomed thousands of travelers daily, carrying soldiers, families, and businessmen to destinations across the country. But when the terminal began to decline and large sections were closed off, the echoes of those millions of journeys did not disappear. Today, visitors, maintenance staff, and late-night security personnel report experiences that suggest the terminal as past continues to inhabit its halls. Shadowy figures pace empty platforms, whispers drift through deserted corridors, and doors open and close without explanation. The sound of trains rolling through sections long abandoned seems to echo as vividly as it did a century ago. Shadowy figures are among the most commonly reported apparitions. Those who have worked or explored the station after dark describe seeing silhouettes moving along the platforms, often in purposeful, human-like ways. One maintenance worker recalled cleaning the West Wing late at night when he noticed a dark figure pacing slowly along the far platform. At first, he thought it was another employee, but as he approached, the figure remained just out of reach, growing more shadowy and undefined until it disappeared entirely. Many describe the figures as wearing period clothing, including long coats and hats, suggesting they are commuters from the early 20th century, eternally waiting for trains that no longer arrive. Visitors and staff have also reported hearing whispers echoing through empty halls. The voices are faint but distinct, as though people are talking just around a corner or through a wall. Some of these whispers are indistinct murmurs, almost like conversations in a foreign language, while others sound like hurried announcements or someone calling a name. One security guard described walking past the old baggage area when he heard a clear voice say, "A next departure, track 5A." The station was locked, with no other personnel present, and the tracks had been out of service for decades. When he turned toward the source, he saw nothing but darkness and the faint glow of the exit lights reflecting off the walls. Doors in the terminal also seemed to move on their own. Employees have told stories of heavy metal doors that swing open or shut without anyone touching them. One worker recounted a situation where she left the room to check a storage closet. Upon returning, the door she had just secured was wide open. She checked the lock, and in Giza, it was impossible for it to have moved by itself. On another occasion, a janitor passing the East Corridor at night heard a door creak open behind him, followed by the sound of footsteps crossing the threshold. When he turned, the hallway was empty, and the door slowly swung shut without assistance. These unexplained movements are often accompanied by cold drafts, the sound of trains moving through the abandoned sections of the terminal, the rhythmic clatter of wheels on rails, the hiss of steam, the low rumble of engines rolling in, the metallic groan of wheels, the distant whistle of a train arriving. One paranormal research team conducting an investigation in the old West Wing recorded audio of a train passing by, even though the tracks have been in use for decades. Several members described feeling vibrations through the floor, as though the train were real, before the noise faded into the still air. Others have reported standing on empty platforms, seeing nothing in the darkness, and hearing an approaching train that disappears before it reaches them. The terminal's architecture amplifies these eerie phenomena. Long, arched corridors carry sound in strange ways. sometimes making footsteps seem closer or further than they are. The high ceilings and massive walls hold temperature variations, creating cold spots that seem to follow witnesses. Investigators have noticed these cold pockets often coincide with areas where shadowy figures are most frequently seen, suggesting a connection between the apparitions and the environmental changes. In some rooms, the temperature can drop dramatically in moments, sending visible chills across the skin and breath into the air, even on warm days. Many believe the haunting is tied to the terminal's vibrant past. For decades, millions of travelers passed through, each with stories of joy, sorrow, anticipation, or fear. Soldiers departed for distant wars, families said tearful goodbyes, and immigrants arrived in search of new lives. These intense emotions may have imprinted themselves on the building, leaving a kind of residual energy that continues to replay. Others suggest intelligent spirits remain behind to beings aware that the world has changed, yet continuing to perform the routines they knew in life. Pacing the platforms, moving through corridors, or waiting for trains that will never come. Visitors who explore the Terminala as abandoned sections describe a palpable sense of being part of another time. Shadowed figures move silently through their line of sight. Whispers drift from empty rooms, and the distant clanging of phantom trains reminds them of an era long gone. Those who have spent long nights in the building report leaving with an acute awareness that the old St. Louis terminal is more than brick and stela. It is a living memory, a crossroads where the spirits of history still tread the platforms, pacing their journeys between departure and eternity. Late at night, when the city is quiet and the lights cast long, angular shadows to the Terminala S halls, it is easy to imagine the station as it once was. Crowds rushing to catch trains, conductors calling out destinations, engines rolling in and out of. Yet in these moments, even without the living present, the terminal seems full. Shadowy commuters still wait on platforms. Whispered conversations linger along the corridors. Doors open and close as if touched by invisible hands. And the sound of old trains rolling on tracks long silent, reminds anyone who listens that in this terminal, the past never truly departs, it continues to move, echoing in time, through the halls of the St. Louis terminal. Baltimore Union Station in Maryland has long been a landmark of the city, a hub of transportation with soaring ceilings, marble floors, and grand halls designed to impress travelers for over a century. Yet, while the main concourse remains bustling with commuters and visitors, the abandoned wings of the station tell a far different story. These long-forgotten corridors and closed-off platforms have been the subject of numerous reports of unexplained phenomena. Those who venture into these areas speak of echoing footsteps along empty hallways, distant voices where no one should be, and shadowy figures that vanish into walls. For those who have spent time there, the abandoned wings are a place where the past refuses to remain silent. One of the most consistent reports comes from maintenance staff who work late-night shifts in the unused sections. Walking the long hallways, they often hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps following behind them. The echoes are precise, deliberate, and humana, yet when they turn to confront the source, the corridors are empty. One night, a janitor recounted feeling the presence of someone walking just a few steps behind him, each footfall falling in perfect rhythm with his own. When he reached the end of the hallway, he spun around, only to see the shadow of a person dissolve into the wall before his eyes. The cold draft that accompanied the figure lingered, chilling the air and sending goosebumps across his arms. Voices are another common feature of the abandoned wings. Visitors report hearing conversations carried to the corridors, sometimes polite and orderly, other times hurried or distressed. These are not echoes of current activity, they are murmurs that seem to come from the very walls themselves. A paranormal research team exploring the station recorded multiple EVPs, capturing voices asking questions, calling names, and giving instructions as if addressing passengers long gone. One investigator replayed a recording in disbelief, hearing a female voice clearly say, "Hey, hurry, you LL miss your train. Even though the tracks in that wing have not seen service for decades." The same recording also contained indistinct murmurs, layering a sense of life over the desolate space. shadowy figures appear in the most unexpected locations. Several employees and explorers have reported seeing people moving across corridors, only to vanish suddenly as they approach a doorway or turn a corner. These figures are often described as partially transparent, like the faint projection of someone caught between two worlds. One longtime security guard described walking toward an old baggage room when he saw a man in a suit standing motionless near a bench. The guard called out, expecting a visitor or staff member, but the man simply turned his head and stepped back into the wall, disappearing without a trace. The air grew inexplicably cold in the space where the figure had been, leaving the guard unnerved and shaken for hours afterward. Investigators have consistently noted cold drafts in areas where no ventilation or airflow exists. These cold spots are sudden and localized, often appearing near reported sightings of figures or in corners of empty halls. One team described their thermal cameras detecting pockets of cold air forming and dissipating in patterns that mimic human movement. It was as if the temperature itself was being manipulated by unseen entities. A subtle but unnerving reminder that the abandoned wings are far from lifeless. The floors and staircases also seem to preserve the energy of countless steps from a bygone era. Long after the public has departed, visitors report the rhythmic creak of wooden stairs and the steady tap of shoes on tile. Sometimes the footsteps keep pace with the listener's own steps, echoing their movements as though a companion has joined them. Other times, the sounds pass ahead and fade away, leaving only silence and the soft hum of the stationized remaining lights. Witnesses have said these footsteps are often accompanied by a sense of urgency, like passengers rushing to catch trains that no longer exist. Doors throughout the abandoned wings behave in mysterious ways. Heavy wooden doors swing open or slam shut without warning, sometimes repeatedly in the same night. A former maintenance worker told of passing a storage room where the door slowly opened just as he approached, revealing an empty room with shelves covered in dust. When he returned minutes later, the door had closed on its own, leaving him with the lingering sensation of being watched. Many have suggested that these movements are caused by spirits replaying routines from the stationized operational days, as if the building remembers the flow of passengers and staff and continues to act out in their absence. Even the air itself seems charged with residual energy. People entering the abandoned wings report a heavy sensation, a mix of anticipation and unease, as though the station itself is aware of their presence. Some explorers describe feeling a cold hand brush past their shoulder or a sudden pull on their coat sleeve. Others note the faint smell of steam engines and coal lingering in the air, though the tracks in this section have been inactive for decades. For those who step into Baltimore Union Stationized abandoned wings, the experience is both fascinating and unnerving. Shadowy figures pace the platforms, unseen voices echo down the corridors, and doors open and close as though moved by invisible hands. The cold drafts and footsteps, captured in recordings and felt firsthand, suggest a lingering presence, a memory of countless travelers who once passed through these halls. Even now, in the quiet hours after the stationized bustle has faded, the abandoned wings seem Olivia, haunted by the people who once called this place a crossroads, continuing to move through time in a station that has refused to let them go. Late at night, when the main concourse is empty and the lights glow softly against the marble and steel, the abandoned wings of Baltimore Union Station tell their own story. Figures appear and vanish, whispers float from empty rooms, and the rhythmic clatter of invisible feet follows those who dare walk these halls. It is a place where history lingers, where the echoes of the past refuse to die, and where the spirits of travelers long gone still walk among the corridors, pacing, waiting, and remembering. The old New Orleans train depot in Louisiana is a structure steeped in history, its walls having witnessed over a century of comings and goings, of departures, arrivals, reunions, and farewells. Today, while much of the depot has been preserved for historical tours and occasional events, several areas remain abandoned, their platforms empty and their corridors silent. Yet those who venture into these forgotten wings after hours report experiences that suggest the past is far from gone. Visitors and staff alike have seen figures walking along the deserted platforms. heard the mournful sound of trains that no longer run, and encountered moments that cannot be explained by logic or reason. The most frequently reported apparition is that of a woman dressed in vintage clothing, her style suggesting the early 20th century. Her hands clasped tightly in front of her. What makes her appearance particularly unsettling is the expression on her face. Many say her features are drawn with sadness, her eyes downcast, and her lips trembling as if she were crying silently. Some claim to feel an overwhelming sense of sorrow in the air when she appears, a weight that presses against the chest and chills the bones. One visitor recounted walking down the main platform late in the evening when he first noticed her. She was several yards ahead, staring into the distance as though waiting for someone who would never arrive. As he approached, he could hear the faint sound of soft crying, though the platform was otherwise deserted. He called out, thinking she might need assistance, but she did not respond. When he took a few more steps forward, she slowly turned her head, and before he could reach her, she vanished in Tyrelia, leaving no trace, no movement in the air, only the lingering echo of sorrow. Even in sections of the depot long closed to the public, visitors have reported hearing the shrill, metallic whistle of a locomotive echoing through empty halls. Sometimes it is distant and mournful, carried on a breeze as though a train were approaching from beyond the city. Other times, it is startlingly close, rattling the rafters and causing lights to flicker. One late-night security guard described walking down a deserted corridor when a whistle sounded directly above him. He instinctively looked up the staircase toward the main hall, but saw nothing. Moments later, he heard the faint rumble of wheels against rails, a rhythmic clatter that faded into silence before any train could have possibly been there. Some witnesses have felt as though they are being followed. While observing the woman on the platform, several people reported the faint tapping of footsteps echoing behind them, matching their own pace. When they turned to confront the source, no one was present. Investigators have suggested that the energy of the depot, combined with its long history of departures and separations, may create a kind of residual imprint, replaying moments from the past in a loop that only some are sensitive enough to perceive. Paranormal teams who have explored the abandoned sections have captured evidence that supports these accounts. Cold drafts swirl around corners and empty stairwells, sometimes creating visible ripples in coats or scarves. Temperature readings often drop unexpectedly in the same areas where the woman has been reported. Audio equipment has picked up faint eps of voices whispering words like "A donatili mea," "Ai, hello, wait for you," though no living person is nearby. One team described a session where their cameras recorded a fleeting, translucent figure walking along the platform, appearing for only a few seconds before dissolving into a wall behind it. Even the architecture of the depot seems to contribute to its haunting nature. Long, narrow hallways carry sound unusually far, and archways and open spaces create echoes that amplify footsteps, whispers, and distant whistles. Many who have experienced these phenomena describe the sensation of being watched, of unseen eyes tracking their movements, particularly near the main waiting rooms and older platforms that have not been used in decades. The combination of visual apparitions, auditory phenomena, and sudden drops in temperature leaves witnesses with a strong impression that the depot itself retains the energy of its past. One particularly chilling story comes from a group of urban explorers who stayed in the depot after hours to take photographs. While setting up their cameras on the upper platform, they noticed a woman walking alone along the tracks. As they tried to approach, she paused, looked directly at them, and then slowly disappeared, leaving behind only a lingering chill and a faint echo of a train whistle. The group reported that the air seemed heavier afterward, as if filled with grief that had accumulated over generations of travelers who passed through the station. Some speculate that she may be a spirit of a woman waiting for a loved one who never returned, eternally wandering the platforms where countless farewells occurred. Others suggest that the old New Orleans train depot itself acts as a conduit for residual energy, replaying fragments of the past for those who venture into the deserted spaces. Whatever the cause, the experiences are consistently reported. a woman in vintage clothing, silent tears on her cheeks, disappearing when approached. The echo of trains that no longer exist, and the unshakable feeling that the past is very much present. Today, while the main concourse of the depot still hosts travelers and tourists, the abandoned platforms remain a place of quiet mystery. Those who explore these areas after hours may glimpse the sorrowful figure walking along the tracks, hear the haunting whistles and clatter of phantom trains, and feel the lingering weight of history pressing against the walls. In the old New Orleans train depot, time does not move forward in the abandoned wing set lingers, replaying the sorrow, longing, and memories of a bygone era for anyone willing to witness it. Seattle King Street Station in Washington is a landmark of the city, its elegant brick facade and grand interior a reminder of the golden age of rail travel. Though the main concourse still welcomes passengers each day, large sections of the station have long been abandoned, closed off to the public, and left to gather dust and shadow. In these neglected areas, however, time seems to behave differently. Staff, security personnel, and urban explorers report experiences that suggest the past is far from gone. Phantom trains roar along tracks that no longer see service. Footsteps echo across empty corridors. Shadowy figures slip silently through the halls. The old speaker system, long disconnected from modern announcements, sometimes carries the faint voice of a conductor or an old boarding call, as if the building itself is replaying memories from decades ago. The first signs that something is amiss often come in the form of sound. Many who work late shifts report hearing the distinct clatter of train wheels over tracks in sections that have been inactive for years. The sound is unmistakable. The metallic grinding of wheels, the low rumble of engines, the rhythm of cars rolling along rails. On some nights, the phantom train seems to approach from a distance, growing louder with each step, only to fade suddenly into silence before it could have reached any physical platform. Security guards describe standing on the empty tracks, peering into darkness, and feeling the vibrations in the floorboards as though a massive locomotive were passing beneath them, though nothing is visible. Late-night cleaners and explorers have reported hearing steps following behind them, sometimes matching their own pace, other times approaching from a hallway to their left or right. One maintenance worker recounted sweeping the old East Corridor when he noticed a faint tap of shoes on tile behind him. Thinking it was a co-worker, he called out, but no one responded. As he turned, the footsteps stopped abruptly. When he shined his flashlight down the corridor, there was no one in sight, only the long, dimly lit hall stretching ahead, silent once again. Witnesses describe the sensation as unnerving, the air growing colder, the hallway feeling charged with an invisible presence. The air growing colder, the hallway feeling charged with an invisible presence. Shadowy figures are the most striking of the station as reported apparitions. People have described silhouettes darting across corridors, appearing briefly at the end of a platform or near a stairwell before vanishing, as if they had passed through solid walls. Many appear humanoid but lack clear detail, their shapes dark and indistinct. Some explorers claim to have seen figures in old conductor uniforms, standing beside tracks or walking along platforms with precise, deliberate steps, as if performing a routine that has been repeated countless times. When approached, these figures dissolve, leaving only an empty hallway and a lingering sense of being observed. The Station-I's old speaker system adds another layer of mystery. Though no longer connected to modern operations, faint announcements sometimes seem to play for the old fixtures, clear enough to make words out but faint and fleeting. Visitors report hearing calls like a next departure, track 3 or a passengers with 1015. Please proceed to the platform, even when no other sound exists. One paranormal research team recorded a session in the abandoned ticketing hall and later played back the audio, capturing the unmistakable tones and announcement that would have been heard decades ago. Those present said it gave them chills, as if the voices of long-gone passengers were speaking directly to them across time. Temperature changes also accompany these phenomena. Cold drafts appear suddenly in areas that have no ventilation, often coinciding with reports of footsteps or apparitions. Explorers describe stepping into a hallway and feeling an icy chill pass over them, their breath visible in the air despite warm conditions elsewhere in the station. Thermal cameras used by investigative teams have detected pockets of cooler air moving through the halls, as if guided by an invisible presence, reinforcing the idea that these are not merely imagined experiences. Some of the most unnerving experiences occur on the abandoned platforms. Visitors have described standing on a silent platform when a faint glow of phantom train lights appears at the end of the tracks. The faint glow of phantom train lights appears at the end of the tracks. The lights advance slowly, accompanied by the sound of rolling wheels and distant whistles, only to vanish before the train reaches them. Others have seen fleeting shadows among the benches or near old signage, sometimes resembling commuters waiting for a train that departed long ago. Witnesses say these figures do not interact with the environment in any conventional way. They move through the station as if they are part of it, and yet entirely separate. The stationized architecture seems to amplify the phenomena. High ceilings and open concourses carry sound in unusual ways, making distant noises seem close, while archways and stairwells create the illusion of movement where none exists. Many who have spent time in the abandoned sections describe a sensation of being watched, a subtle but constant awareness that someone or something is nearby. Some claim to feel a pressure in the air, a weight that grows heavier, as footsteps or voices appear, only to vanish alongside the shadowy forms. For those who have explored Seattle King Street Station-I's abandoned areas, the experience is both eerie and mesmerizing. Phantom trains continue to roll along tracks that no longer exist. Footsteps echo in empty corridors. Shadowy figures pass silently, and old station announcements drift through the air. The combination of sound, movement, temperature, and visual phenomena suggests a building alive with echoes of the past, preserving the energy of countless travelers who once passed through its halls. Even as the city outside continues its modern rhythms, within these abandoned areas, the station remains suspended in time, a ghostly crossroads where history walks beside the living, unseen but undeniably present. Old Philadelphia Broad Street Station in Pennsylvania stands as a haunting reminder of the city's bustling rail history. Though the station has long been partially closed and many of its sections abandoned, it remains a place where the past refuses to stay silent. Visitors and staff report strange phenomena that cannot be explained by natural causes. Apparent commuters wait silently on empty platforms. Lights flicker without warning, and objects move as if touched by invisible hands. Paranormal teams investigating the station have documented shadowy silhouettes in broken hallways, creating an atmosphere that is both eerie and mesmerizing. One of the most frequently reported experiences involves ghostly commuters. Individuals who walk the abandoned platforms after dark often describe figures appearing to wait patiently, dressed in early 20th century attire. Men in suits and hats, women in long skirts and gloves, stand silently near benches and ticket counters as if expecting a train that will never arrive. Some witnesses have reported seeing entire groups of passengers, frozen in time, only to vanish suddenly when approached. One urban explorer recounted walking down a deserted platform and noticing a man standing near a column. Men in suits and hats, women in long skirts and gloves, stand silently near benches and ticket counters as if expecting a train that will never arrive. As she drew closer, the figure dissolved into the shadows, leaving her with a chilling impression that she had been observed but unseen. Flickering lights add another layer of unease to the station. Even in sections where electrical systems have long been disconnected, overhead lamps and wall fixtures blink unpredictably. One security guard described patrolling a hallway when a row of lights flickered on and off in a rhythm that seemed almost deliberate. He reported feeling a sudden drop in temperature at the same moment, followed by the faint echo of footsteps from the corridor behind him. Such phenomena are common throughout the abandoned areas, creating an impression of presence even when no one else is in the station. Objects moving on their own are also frequently reported. Visitors and staff have recounted chairs shifting slightly across platforms, paper sliding from counters, and doors opening or closing without any physical cause. In one instance, a maintenance worker left a stack of old timetables on a counter. When he returned minutes later, the papers were scattered across the floor, as if dropped by someone who had passed through the room invisibly. In another case, a door to a storage closet swung open and shut repeatedly during a late-night patrol, despite being locked from the inside. These incidents, often accompanied by sudden cold drafts, leave witnesses unsettled and sometimes force them to leave the station entirely. Paranormal teams exploring the abandoned wings have documented phenomena that defy conventional explanation. Using night vision cameras and thermal imaging, they have captured shadowy silhouettes moving through broken hallways and empty rooms. These forms are often human-like, but lack distinct features, appearing and disappearing, as if they are passing between dimensions. Investigators reported that some figures seem to watch their movements, pausing momentarily before vanishing. EVPs recorded in these areas include faint whispers, indecipherable voices, and occasional clear phrases like "a boarding now" or "a next train to Partinga." Footsteps are another common occurrence. Individuals walking the deserted platforms often hear the soft, rhythmic tap of shoes behind them, matching their own pace or sometimes approaching from the opposite direction. Many report turning to confront the source, only to find empty hallways stretching ahead. The sound sometimes continues for several steps after the witness has stopped, fading gradually as though the presence is retreating into the shadows. Witnesses describe feeling a palpable tension in the air during these moments, as if the station itself is holding its breath. Temperature fluctuations are frequent in the abandoned areas. Cold drafts appear suddenly in corners and stairwells, often coinciding with sightings of shadowy figures or moving objects. One paranormal team noted that when a silhouette appeared on camera, the ambient temperature dropped sharply in that section of the hallway. Thermal imaging also revealed pockets of cooler air moving independently of airflow from vents or open doors, suggesting an unseen presence interacting with the environment. The stationized architecture amplifies these eerie experiences. Long corridors, high ceilings, and archways carry sound in unusual ways, making distant noises appear close and footsteps seem to come from unexpected directions. Broken windows and damaged walls create shadows that shift with minimal light, adding to the sense of movement, even when no one is present. Investigators and witnesses alike report the sensation being watched, a subtle but constant awareness of another presence nearby. Even during daylight hours, those who venture into the closed sections report feeling the residue of history. The energy of millions of travelers who pass through the station over the decades seems to linger, replaying fragments of farewells, hurried arrivals, and silent anticipation. For some, it is a chilling experience. For others, it is a fascinating glimpse into a living memory. Visitors often leave with the impression that the station itself has absorbed the emotions and routines of its occupants, preserving them long after the trains have stopped running and the platforms have emptied. In the abandoned wings of old Philadelphia Broad Street Station, ghostly commuters continue to wait. Lights flicker without cause, and objects shift as though handled by unseen hands. Shadowy silhouettes move through broken hallways. Footsteps echo down empty corridors, and faint voices whisper from speakers no longer functioning. Lights flicker without cause, and objects shift as though handled by unseen hands. Faint voices whisper from speakers no longer functioning. The combination of visual apparitions, auditory phenomena, and environmental anomalies creates a space where the past and present collide. For those who spend time exploring these abandoned areas, the station is more than a relic of Historia. It is a crossroads where memory and spirit linger, where the echoes of daily life refuse to fade, and where the ghosts of Philadelphia's past continue to walk the platforms they once called home. Cincinnati Union Terminal in Ohio is a monumental structure, celebrated for its grand rotunda, soaring ceilings, and intricate Art Deco details. Though the main areas of the terminal remain active with trains and visitors, many sections have been closed for decades. It is within these abandoned wings and corridors that unusual occurrences have been reported, creating an atmosphere that is both eerie and compelling. Visitors and staff describe seeing figures dressed in period attire, hearing phantom train whistles and footsteps echoing through empty corridors, creating an atmosphere that is both eerie and compelling. Cold spots appear without warning, and shadows move in ways that defy explanation, suggesting that the terminal may be haunted by the lingering energy of its past. The most common sightings involve figures in clothing from the early 20th century. People who explore the closed sections often describe men in suits with pocket watches, women in long dresses and hats, and children carrying small suitcases, all appearing as if frozen in a moment of travel. One visitor reported walking along a deserted platform when he noticed a woman in a navy blue dress standing near an old ticket counter. She seemed lost in thought, staring at the floor, her posture rigid and deliberate. As he stepped closer, she suddenly turned her head, and before he could call out, she vanished entirely, leaving nothing behind except a faint echo of soft footsteps. Similar encounters have been reported across multiple closed wings, suggesting a consistent presence rather than isolated experiences. Train whistles are another recurring phenomenon. Witnesses frequently report hearing the shrill, metallic whistle of locomotives moving along tracks that are no longer in use. These sounds are startlingly realistic, complete with the deep rumble of engines and the rhythmic clatter of wheels on rails. One evening, a security guard patrolling the western wing of the terminal described hearing a whistle that grew steadily louder, followed by the unmistakable vibration of a train moving toward the platform. When he stepped outside to investigate, the tracks were empty and the air was still, leaving him with a lingering sense of unease. Visitors often say the sound seems to follow them, as though a phantom train is moving alongside their path, disappearing only when they reach the end of a hallway or platform. Footsteps echoing in empty corridors are perhaps the most unnerving feature of the terminal's abandoned sections. People walking through long hallways have reported hearing taps and clatters that match their own pace, sometimes falling in perfect rhythm behind them. When they turn to confront the source, there is no one there. In some cases, the footsteps pass by in the opposite direction, fading into silence before the witness can see anything. One paranormal team, using audio recording devices, captured multiple instances of footsteps following them through corridors where no other human had been present for hours. The recordings, when played back, revealed a rhythm and weight that could only belong to a living person, though no one was there. Cold spots are frequent in the closed areas of the terminal. Visitors report sudden drops in temperature, often coinciding with sightings of figures or the appearance of moving shadows. One urban explorer described walking down a hallway when he felt an icy chill sweep over him, his breath visible in the air despite warm temperatures elsewhere in the building. Thermal imaging used by investigative teams has revealed localized cold pockets that appear and vanish unpredictably, sometimes moving along corridors in ways that mimic human movement. Witnesses often feel the chill linger even after the figure or shadow that caused it has disappeared, leaving an unsettling reminder that the space is not empty. Moving shadows are another aspect of the terminal's mysterious activity. Observers have reported dark shapes darting across hallways, shifting along walls, or stretching across floors with no visible source. These shadows often move independently of light, and sometimes appear to react to people in the room, pausing or changing direction when approached. One paranormal investigator noted a shadow passing along the broken tiles of a stairwell while he was recording EVPs. When he shined a flashlight into the area, the shadow dissolved instantly, leaving only a dark corner and the sound of distant echoes. The architecture of Cincinnati Union Terminal seems to amplify these phenomena. High ceilings, large archways, and long corridors carry sounds unusually far, making footsteps and distant noises seem closer than they are. Broken windows, empty offices, and abandoned platforms create pockets of shadow that move and change with the slightest light. These features, combined with the residual energy of decades of travelers, may contribute to the haunting experiences reported by visitors. Even during daytime hours, those who explore the closed sections report a palpable sense of history lingering in the air. The energy of thousands of travelers who once passed through the terminal seems to persist, manifesting in visual, auditory, and tactile ways. Some interpret these phenomena as residual echoes of the past, replaying moments of anticipation, farewell, or arrival. Others believe the terminal is home to intelligent spirits who continue to move through the space, performing tasks that are familiar to them from life. Ghostly commuters wait silently on empty platforms. Train whistles sound across tracks no longer in use, and footsteps echo through corridors with no visible source. Shadows move independently of light. Cold spots appear suddenly, and the air is thick with a sense of presence. Visitors and investigators alike report experiences that challenge the boundaries of the natural world, suggesting that the terminal's closed sections are far from lifeless. Even as modern trains and crowds fill the active areas, the abandoned wings remain a place where the past lingers, where echoes of daily life continue to play out, and where the spirits of Cincinnati's former travelers walk unseen, waiting for trains that will never arrive. Old Fort Worth Station in Texas, with its red brick walls and historic arch windows, stands as a silent monument to the city's railroading past. Once a hub of constant activity, bustling with travelers, conductors, and the rhythm of trains arriving and departing. Large portions of the station have long since been abandoned, though the main areas may still receive occasional visitors. The closed platforms, waiting rooms, and hallways retain an air of stillness, broken only by phenomena that suggest the station has never truly been empty. Visitors and staff report seeing phantom passengers, hearing footsteps where no one is present, and faint whispers that call out names, echoing through abandoned spaces as if the past refuses to let go. The most frequently reported phenomenon is the appearance of passengers standing silently on the platforms. These figures are often described as wearing clothing typical of the early 20th century, men in suits and hats, women in long dresses, some carrying small suitcases. Witnesses describe seeing these figures waiting as if for a train long since retired from service. One visitor recounted walking along an abandoned platform when he noticed a woman standing near the edge, her gaze fixed down the tracks. She held a small handbag tightly to her chest, and for a moment she seemed utterly real. As he stepped closer, she turned toward him, but before he could speak, she vanished completely, leaving the platform empty and eerily silent. Many who have explored the station after hours report similar sightings, often occurring near the corners of old benches or beside long-unused ticket counters. Footsteps echoing in abandoned waiting rooms are another common experience. Individuals exploring the station have reported the sound of shoes moving across tile or with floors when they are alone. Sometimes the footsteps follow their own, perfectly matching the rhythm of their steps. Other times, the sounds approach from another corridor or stairwell, grow louder, and then abruptly stop without explanation. One maintenance worker described sweeping a deserted waiting area when he suddenly heard the heavy clatter of steps crossing behind him. When he turned, the room was empty, and the silence that followed was thick, almost oppressive. Investigators using audio recording equipment have captured these footsteps as well, documenting rhythms and weights that clearly suggest human activity in spaces otherwise devoid of life. Faint whispers are a particularly chilling aspect of the stationized activity. Sometimes the whispers are barely perceptible, like fragments of conversations lost in time. Sometimes the whispers are clear, calling a hurry UPA or a don't miss your train, while other times they are clear, calling a hurry UPA or a don't miss your train, and while other times they are barely perceptible, like fragments of conversations lost in time. While other times they are clear, calling a hurry UPA or a don't miss your train, and while other times they are barely perceptible, like fragments of conversations lost in time. Paranormal teams have recorded these EVPs in abandoned sections of the station, noting that the voices often coincide with cold spots or sudden movements of shadowy forms. One investigator recalled hearing a whisper call his name as he approached the end of a platform. The sound was soft but distinct, carrying a weight that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He looked around, but no one was present, and the air remained still. Shadows moving independently of any light source are another frequent occurrence. People exploring the station report shapes that appear dark across hallways or shift along walls, disappearing as soon as they are noticed. These forms are often dark and indistinct, humanoid in shape but lacking clear features, suggesting a presence that exists in a space between reality and memory. One urban explorer described walking down a long corridor when a shadow passed across the far wall, paused, and then seemed to dissolve into the floor. Moments later, she felt a cold brush of air against her arm, though the hallway had no ventilation or drafts. Cold spots are closely tied to these sightings. Sudden drops in temperature are reported throughout the station's abandoned areas, often coinciding with figures, footsteps, or whispers. Witnesses report that these chills can be intense enough to see their breath in the air and feel their skin tighten, creating a physical awareness of the presence even when no visual phenomena are observed. The architecture of Old Fort Worth Station contributes to the haunting effect. High ceilings, arched doorways, and long, narrow corridors carry sound in unusual ways, amplifying footsteps and whispers. Empty waiting rooms echo every movement, making isolated noises seem closer or more insistent than they are. Broken windows and partially boarded platforms allow minimal light to spill across floors, creating shadows that shift and stretch with each step, further enhancing the sense of motion where none should exist. Even during daylight, the abandoned areas hold a weight of memory. The energy of countless travelers who once passed through the station seems to linger, leaving residual impressions that manifest as sights, sounds, and temperature anomalies. For some, this is a chilling experience. For others, it is a hauntingly beautiful connection to a bygone era. Witnesses often report a sense that the station itself remembers the routines and emotions of its former patronta, the hurried goodbyes, the excited arrivals, the quiet anticipation of journeys yet to begin. In the abandoned wings of Old Fort Worth Station, phantom passengers continue to wait on empty platforms. Footsteps echo through hallways without origin, and whispers call names long forgotten. Shadows move with intent, and sudden cold spots remind visitors that the spaces are not empty. Even as trains continue to run on modern tracks outside and the city hums with life, the closed areas of the station remain suspended in a ghostly reflection of their past. Here, the spirits of travelers long gone continue to walk the platforms, linger in waiting rooms, and whisper their presence to anyone willing to listen, preserving the memory of a station that time has not entirely claimed. Old Atlanta Terminal Station in Georgia is a landmark of both architectural grandeur and historical significance. Once a bustling hub where travelers arrived and departed daily, the station now holds vast, quiet corridors, some of which have been sealed off for decades. While the main sections of the terminal have been preserved for limited use, the abandoned areas have become a magnet for night explorers, historians, and those drawn to the mysteries of the past. Across these empty halls and closed platforms, visitors report strange occurrences that defy explanation. The sound of train doors shutting and faint voices carrying through areas where no one has walked for years. The most striking phenomena are the apparitions of ghostly passengers. Witnesses describe seeing figures dressed in early 20th century attire, many appearing to be mid-motion, walking with purpose, carrying bags, or tending forgotten luggage on the platforms. One explorer recounted walking along a sealed corridor when he saw a man in a long coat and hat bending to adjust a leather suitcase. As if preparing to board a train, as the witness stepped closer, the figure lifted his head and vanished into the shadows. Others report seeing entire groups of travelers, frozen in time, moving with energy that feels almost natural, yet completely intangible. The figures are often observed performing routine actions from the station's operational days, as if the ghosts are replaying fragments of history that refuse to be forgotten. Train doors are another frequent source of eerie activity. Even in sections where rails are long gone and access is blocked, explorers have reported hearing the unmistakable clanging of metal doors closing, accompanied by a metallic echo that reverberates through hallways and platforms. One night, a small group of visitors heard the rhythmic slam of a train compartment door just beyond a sealed entrance. They approached the area cautiously, but there was no train, no mechanical movement, only the lingering echo bouncing off walls and ceilings. These phantom sounds are often accompanied by the sensation of movement nearby, as if unseen passengers have just departed, leaving only the memory of their presence in the air. As if unseen passengers have just departed, leaving only the memory of their presence in the air. Faint voices are another common phenomenon, often heard murmuring in empty hallways. Visitors describe hearing snippets of conversation, names being called, or simple phrases like, "all aboard," or "don't miss your train." Paranormal investigators have captured these faint murmurs on recording devices, revealing conversations that cannot be explained by wind, acoustics, or distant city noise. In some cases, the voices seem to follow the witness down corridors, lingering in corners and stairwells before fading abruptly. Cold spots are frequently reported alongside these ghostly sights and sounds. Thermal imaging conducted by investigative teams has revealed pockets of cold air that move seemingly independently of natural airflow, drifting down corridors and across platforms with no visible cause. Witnesses often feel the chill deepen as the apparitions approach, adding a physical awareness to the already unsettling presence. Shadows moving on their own contribute to the station's eerie reputation. Observers have reported dark forms shifting across walls, darting down corridors, or stretching along the floors, sometimes disappearing just as they are noticed. These shadows often appear to react to movement, pausing or changing direction when explorers approach. One investigator described watching a shadow pass along the abandoned baggage area, then vanish as a sudden cold breeze swept through the room. The experience left a lasting impression, highlighting the station eye's persistent, otherworldly energy. The architecture of old Atlanta Terminal Station seems to amplify these phenomena. The high ceilings, long hallways, and open platforms carry sound and shadows in unusual ways, making even distant noises appear close, and small movements seem larger than life. Arched doorways and cavernous rooms create echoes that can confuse the senses. Abandoned offices and sealed waiting areas cast long, shifting shadows that play tricks on the eye. Visitors report that the station feels alive at night, a place where the past is layered over the present, and where echoes of a once bustling environment persist. Even during the day, when sunlight spills through the remaining windows, the abandoned sections carry a weight of memory. The energy of countless travelers, those hurrying to catch trains, greeting loved ones, or seeing them off appears to linger in the walls. Many who explore these areas leave with a heightened sense of history, as if the station itself is a living repository of human activity. The ghosts of Atlanta Terminal Station are not violent or threatening. They are simply remnants of a time when the station was alive with motion, conversation, and anticipation. In the sealed and abandoned sections of old Atlanta Terminal Station, ghostly passengers continue to move luggage as though preparing to board trains long gone. Train doors slam without explanation. Footsteps echo through empty hallways, and faint voices call out across spaces no longer in use. Shadows shift independently of light, and cold spots appear without warning, marking the presence of something unseen. Even in modern times, when the city outside hums with life and trains run on active tracks. The city outside hums with life and trains run on active tracks. The abandoned areas of the terminal remain suspended in a spectral reflection of their past. Here, history walks alongside the present, and the spirits of long-departed travelers continue to carry their luggage, hear their trains, and whisper their stories to anyone willing to enter and witness their timeless journey in its abandoned and seldom used areas. Large portions of the station have been closed for decades, leaving hallways, platforms, and waiting rooms empty. Yet those who venture into these forgotten spaces often report experiences that defy logic. The sound of trains arriving echoes through corridors where no train is present, and phantom footsteps follow visitors through empty hallways. The station seems to preserve fragments of its past, replaying them for those who are will linger or perhaps unfortunate enough to notice. The most common sightings involve shadowy commuters, often glimpsed on platforms and near old ticket counters. Visitors describe these figures as vaguely human in form, dressed in early to mid-20th century attire. Men in suits and fedoras, women in dresses and hats, appear as if frozen in their routines. One night, a security guard reported seeing a man standing at the far end of a deserted platform, gazing down the tracks as though waiting for a train. The figure did not move, nor did it react when the guard approached. And when he reached the spot, the man had vanished, leaving only the dimly lit station and a sudden drop in temperature. Other witnesses have described entire groups of commuters walking silently along corridors, or clustering near benches, their forms partially transparent, and fading when observed too closely. Phantom train arrivals are another frequent phenomenon. Visitors often hear the metallic clatter of wheels against rails, accompanied by the low hum of engines and the distinct whistle of an approaching train. These sounds are startlingly realistic, echoing across platforms and through corridors as if a train were truly arriving. On many occasions, witnesses report feeling the vibrations of an oncoming locomotive, only for the noise to abruptly vanish when they investigate. One urban explorer recalled standing on an empty platform late at night when the sound of a train grew steadily louder behind her. She felt the floor tremble slightly, and the metallic scent of iron seemed to fill the air. Yet, when she looked, the tracks were empty and silence settled over the station. The experience left her shaken, with a lingering sense that the past was pressing in around her. Phantom footsteps are among the most unnerving experiences reported. Explorers walking through empty hallways often hear the soft tap or clatter of shoes following their own pace. Sometimes the footsteps appear to approach from an adjacent corridor or stairwell, and yet when witnesses turn, there is no one in sight. On occasion, the footsteps continue even after the observer has stopped moving, fading gradually into silence as if receding into the walls themselves. Security personnel have reported similar experiences while patrolling the station late at night, describing footsteps echoing through long corridors with no visible source. Investigators capturing audio evidence have documented these steps with rhythm and weight that strongly suggest human presence, although the areas are completely unoccupied. Shadows moving independently of any light source are also frequently observed. These shadows dart along walls, stretch across floors, and sometimes appear near benches or ticket counters. They often seem aware of the observer's movements, pausing or shifting direction when approached. One paranormal research team recorded a shadow moving down a broken hallway while they were using night vision cameras. When they shone a flashlight toward it, the shadow seemed to dissipate, leaving the space empty but charged with tension. Witnesses consistently describe an uneasy sensation during these moments, as though being watched by unseen eyes. Cold spots appear suddenly in hallways, stairwell, and platforms, often coinciding with ghostly figures, phantom trains, or moving shadows. Temperature anomalies are closely linked to these sightings. Thermal imaging conducted by investigative teams has revealed localized pockets of cold air forming in unusual patterns, moving down corridors and across rooms without explanation. Witnesses frequently describe feeling the chill linger even after the apparition or shadow has disappeared, intensifying the sense of presence. The stationized architecture amplifies these experiences. High ceilings, long corridors, and expansive platforms carry sound in unusual ways, making distant noises appear close and creating echoes that seem alive. Arched windows and vacant offices cast elongated shadows, while broken tiles and empty hallways provide the perfect environment for visual and auditory phenomena to manifest. While broken tiles and empty hallways provide the perfect environment for visual and auditory phenomena to manifest. Many who explore the abandoned sections report a strong sensation of history lingering in the air, as if the building itself preserves the routines and energy of its past occupants. Even in the daylight, the closed sections of old Chicago LaSalle Station seem to retain an echo of activity. Visitors often describe the station as being both beautiful and eerie, with the energy of past commuters subtly influencing the present. The memory of travelers hurrying to catch trains, greeting loved ones, or watching friends depart seems to linger in the empty corridors. The ghosts of LaSalle Station are not aggressive or threatening. They are remnants of a time when the station was alive with motion, conversation, and anticipation. In the abandoned wings of old Chicago LaSalle Station, shadowy commuters still linger on empty platforms. Phantom trains roar through silent tracks, and footsteps echo down corridors where no one walks. For those who venture into these forgotten areas, the station is more than a bodega. It is a living memory, a crossroads where the past and present coexist. Even as modern trains continue on active tracks, the abandoned sections remain. A place where time bends, history lingers, and the spirits of travelers long gone continue to move through the halls, unseen but undeniably present. Old Nashville Union Station in Tennessee is a landmark of Southern rail history, with its striking Romanesque architecture, towering clock tower, and expansive platforms. Once the heartbeat of Nashville-esque rail travel, the station now sees only limited use, with much of its original structure closed to the public. Despite this, the abandoned areas retain a palpable energy, one that has drawn both curious visitors and paranormal investigators. Across empty platforms and deserted corridors, reports of ghostly phenomena have persisted for decades. Apparitions walking the platforms, unexplained cold spots in ticketing areas, and lights flickering along the tracks suggest that the station holds memories far too vivid to fade. One of the most commonly reported experiences involves apparitions seen walking along the platforms. Visitors frequently describe figures dressed in clothing from the early 20th century, moving with purpose as if waiting for a train long gone. Men in suits and hats, women in long dresses, and children carrying small suitcases appear in dimly lit areas, often vanishing when approached. They move with purpose as if waiting for a train long gone. Men in suits and hats, women in long dresses, and children carrying small suitcases appear in dimly lit areas, often vanishing when approached. One witness recounted standing near the far end of a deserted platform when a woman in a navy coat appeared before him, glancing down the tracks as though anticipating an arrival. Her steps were deliberate, yet silent, and when he tried to call out, she simply faded into the shadows, leaving only the echo of her movement. Similar experiences have been reported repeatedly in multiple abandoned sections, suggesting that these figures are not isolated occurrences, but part of a persistent presence. Cold spots are another hallmark of the station-esque paranormal activity. In ticketing areas long since closed, visitors have described sudden drops in temperature, sometimes enough to see their breath in the air. These chills often appear without warning and seem to follow movement, appearing near witnesses as apparitions manifest or footsteps echo through the halls. Paranormal investigators using thermal imaging have detected pockets of cold air moving independently of ventilation, drifting along hallways and pooling around old ticket counters. The sensation is often accompanied by an oppressive stillness, a weight in the air that makes even seasoned explorers feel watched. Unexplained lights flickering along the tracks are among the station's most unnerving phenomena. In sections where electrical systems have been inactive for years, overhead lamps and platform lights intermittently glow or pulse, casting shifting shadows across the empty rail lines. One night, a photographer attempting long exposure shots on an abandoned platform captured faint streaks of light along the rails. Upon reviewing the images, he noticed shapes resembling old locomotives in the glow, though no train had been present. These flickering lights often coincide with other phenomena, such as footsteps, cold spots, or the sudden appearance of an apparition, suggesting a connection between the elements. Footsteps echoing through empty hallways are another frequent occurrence. When turning to confront the source, they find the hallways entirely empty. In some cases, the footsteps continue for several steps after the witness has stopped, fading gradually as if retreating into the walls themselves. Security staff patrolling the station at night have shared similar experiences, describing the sensation of being followed or observed in areas that have not been used for decades. Shadows moving independently of light further heighten the station's eerie reputation. Dark forms are often glimpsed along walls, passing through broken doors, or stretching across platforms. They appear to react to human presence, pausing, shifting direction, or vanishing when confronted. Paranormal teams have recorded these shadows using night vision cameras, noting movements that cannot be explained by wind, structural elements, or passing vehicles. Noting movements that cannot be explained by wind, structural elements, or passing vehicles. The shadows often appear near areas where other phenomena are reported, such as cold spots or flickering lights, creating an unsettling sense of interconnected activity. Such as cold spots or flickering lights, creating an unsettling sense of interconnected activity. The architecture of old Nashville Union Station amplifies these experiences. High ceilings, expansive platforms, and long corridors carry sound unusually far, making footsteps whispers while the echo of a phantom train appears startlingly close. Broken windows, empty ticket booths, and abandoned offices create pockets of darkness that make shadows seem alive. Even the familiar features of the station, the vaulted ceilings, arched doorways, and grand staircases take on a spectral quality at night, lending themselves to perception of movement, presence, and time suspended. Visitors who spend time in these closed sections often describe a sense of history pressing in around them. The energy of countless travelers, their farewells, greetings, and hurried movements seems to linger in the walls, floors, and ceilings. Many report the impression that the station remembers its past, replaying fragments of its bustling history through sound, temperature, and visual phenomena. Witnesses leave with a strong feeling that, even as trains continue to arrive on active tracks outside, the spirit of the stationized past commuters continues to inhabit the abandoned areas. In the closed wings of old Nashville Union Station, ghostly figures walk platforms, their movements silent but purposeful. Cold spots linger in long-unused ticketing areas, marking the presence of something unseen. Lights flicker along the empty tracks. Shadows shift in abandoned corridors, and footsteps echo where no one walks. For those who venture into these quiet, historic spaces, the station is more than a bodega, it is a living memory, where the past continues to play out in whispers, light, and shadow. The spirits of old Nashville Union Station remain ever present, silently witnessing the passage of time, waiting for trains that will never arrive, and calling out to anyone who dares to enter their timeless realm. Old Los Angeles Arcade Station in California is a relic of the city's once bustling rail network, a building of ornate archways, long corridors, and high ceilings that evoke an era when train travel was the lifeblood of urban life. Though many parts of the station have been abandoned for decades, the space continues to attract visitors and paranormal investigators drawn to its eerie reputation. Across empty platforms, deserted waiting rooms, and sealed hallways, reports of ghostly activity abound. Figures dressed in conductor uniforms appear. Whispers echo through empty corridors. Phantom luggage rolls across platforms. And investigators have captured orbs and EVP recordings that hint at the lingering presence of stationized past occupants. Whispers echo through empty corridors. Phantom luggage rolls across platforms. And investigators have captured orbs and EVP recordings that hint at the lingering presence of the stationized past occupants. Phantom luggage rolls across platforms, and investigators have captured orbs and EVP recordings that hint at the lingering presence of the stationized past occupants. And investigators have captured orbs and EVP recordings that hint at the lingering presence of the stationized past occupants. The most striking phenomena reported involve apparitions of station personnel, often appearing in traditional conductor uniforms. Visitors have described seeing men in dark jackets and hats walking deliberately along platforms, checking imaginary schedules, or gesturing to phantom passengers. One late-night explorer recounted seeing a conductor near the end of an abandoned platform, standing beside a row of benches, as if waiting for a train to arrive. As she approached to get a closer look, he turned toward her and vanished into thin air, leaving her with a palpable sense of having witnessed something real yet impossible. Others have reported seeing multiple figures in uniform, moving through ticketing areas and across corridors, performing tasks as though the station were fully operational, though it has been closed for decades. Whispers in empty halls are another common occurrence that seem to emanate from the walls themselves, that appear to say a tickets this wire and a boarding now. Witnesses report that the whispers are subtle yet persistent, growing slightly louder before fading abruptly, as though unseen travelers or staff are replaying moments of the station's past. Phantom luggage is among the more unsettling phenomena reported. Visitors have described seeing bags, suitcases, and trunks roll across platforms without any visible cause, sometimes in full view of multiple witnesses. In one account, a night explorer saw a suitcase slide across the platform as if propelled by invisible hands. As he stepped forward to investigate, it abruptly stopped, then slowly shifted to another location, leaving him shaken. Similar reports describe luggage appearing in areas previously vacant, then disappearing entirely, as though the energy of the station's past passengers continues to move through the space, performing tasks that have long since ended. Investigators have also documented orbs and other unexplained visual phenomena. Night vision cameras often capture small, glowing orbs moving through hallways or hovering above platforms. These orbs seem to react to human presence, drifting closer to visitors or investigators before vanishing. Paranormal teams often notice that orb activity coincides with other events, such as whispers, shadowy figures, or the movement of phantom luggage, suggesting an interconnected energy that permeates the abandoned station. Visitors often hear the distinct sound of shoes moving along tile or wooden floors, sometimes mirroring their own pace, other times approaching from unseen directions. One late-night explorer described walking a deserted hallway when he heard the rapid steps of multiple individuals following him, yet when he turned, the corridor was completely empty. The sound resisted for several moments before fading, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Audio recordings from investigative teams reveal similar footsteps, distinct and human in rhythm, captured in areas where no living person could have been present. Cold spots and sudden drops in temperature frequently accompany the station's paranormal activity. Witnesses report sudden chills in abandoned ticketing halls near benches or along empty platforms, often coinciding with sightings of apparitions or unexplained movement. Thermal imaging conducted by investigators has revealed pockets of colder air moving independently of ventilation or drafts, adding a physical dimension to the ghostly presence. Many visitors describe a tangible sensation of being watched during these moments, as though the energy of the station itself is aware of their presence. The architecture of old Los Angeles Arcade Station amplifies these experiences. High ceilings, long corridors, and open platforms carry sound and shadow unusually far, making whispers, footsteps, or distant train sounds appear startlingly close. Broken windows, abandoned offices, and sealed sections create pockets of darkness and shadow, which give visual phenomena a heightened sense of movement and immediacy. Many visitors describe a feeling that the station remembers its past, that the countless travelers and staff who once moved through these spaces have left behind. Echoes that refuse to fade. Even during daylight, the abandoned wings of the station carry an aura of history. The energy of countless travelers, their farewells, greetings, and hurried steps, seems embedded in the walls, floors, and ceilings. Visitors often leave with a heightened awareness of the station as a living memory, where the past continues to overlap with the present. The spirits here are not hostile. They simply persist, continuing routines and replaying moments long since ended. Figures in conductor uniforms walk as though performing their duties. Whispers echo through empty halls, and luggage rolls without visible cause. Orbs drift along walls. Footsteps follow visitors through deserted hallways, and cold spots mark the presence of unseen entities. For those who explore these spaces, the station becomes more than a historical dinga. It is a timeless intersection of past and present, a place where the memories of travelers and staff linger, manifesting in light, sound, and movement. Here, the ghosts of old Los Angeles Arcade Station continue their work, unseen yet undeniable, preserving the rhythm of a world long gone, waiting for anyone who dares to witness it. Old Cincinnati Riverfront Station in Ohio sits as a quiet testament to the city's rich railroad history. Once a lively terminal where passengers hustled to catch trains and freight moved steadily along the tracks. The station now lies partially abandoned. While the main concourses have seen restoration and limited use, many platforms and corridors have been closed for decades, leaving behind a space that feels frozen in time. Visitors and explorers report unusual experiences that suggest the presence of those long departed. Shadowy figures appearing along empty platforms. Cold drafts sweeping through abandoned hallways. The sound of trains arriving on tracks that no longer exist. Many have described the unsettling sensation of being watched while navigating the station as deserted areas. Shadowy figures are among the most frequently reported phenomena. Visitors often describe seeing vague silhouettes moving along platforms, sometimes pausing near benches or ticket counters. These figures resemble early 20th century commuters, with shapes suggesting hats, coats, or luggage, though features are never distinct. One urban explorer recounted walking down a long abandoned platform when a dark figure appeared near the far end, standing still as if waiting for a train. As he approached, the figure shifted slightly, then seemed to dissolve into shadows, leaving him startled and unsure if he had seen a ghost or merely imagined it. Others have reported multiple figures appearing simultaneously, walking silently along platforms or standing in clusters, vanishing when directly observed. The sound of trains arriving on non-existent tracks is another hallmark of the station as haunting. Visitors frequently hear the rumble of wheels, the metallic clatter of rails, and the distant whistle of approaching locomotives. These sounds are startlingly realistic, echoing across platforms and through abandoned corridors, only to vanish when witnesses investigate. One night, a paranormal team exploring the closed northern platforms reported hearing a train pull up, complete with a hiss of steam and the screech of brakes. They rushed to the tracks, but found nothing. The rails were empty and the air was still. The phenomenon often leaves visitors disoriented, as though the station itself is replaying the energy of its operational past. Cold drafts are commonly associated with sightings of figures or phantom trains. Visitors and investigators have reported sudden drops in temperature as they enter empty waiting areas, stairwells, or platforms. Thermal imaging has revealed isolated pockets of cold air moving independently of ventilation or structural drafts. Witnesses often describe a sensation of a chill lingering on their skin, accompanied by an unnerving feeling of presence, as though invisible eyes are observing them from the shadows. The cold spots appear to follow movement in some instances, intensifying the sensation of being watched. Many visitors describe the eerie feeling of being observed, even when they're alone. Walking along the abandoned platforms or through the empty corridors, explorers often report a subtle awareness, a sense of attention from an unseen entity. This sensation can be particularly pronounced near shadowy figures or in areas where cold drafts sweep unexpectedly. One night, a photographer working alone in the western wing of the station felt a distinct presence behind him, a sensation that persisted even after turning multiple times to check for movement. The impression of being watched, combined with other paranormal indicators, leaves many feeling a heightened sense of tension while navigating the station. Footsteps are another commonly experienced phenomenon. Echoes of shoes moving along wooden floors or tiled corridors often match the rhythm of the witness, following them down hallways or across platforms. In some cases, footsteps appear to come from the opposite direction, crossing empty corridors with clear, deliberate weight. Paranormal investigators have captured these sounds on audio recording devices, documenting the presence of footsteps in areas confirmed to be vacant. The effect is disorienting, creating the impression of a living station still active with unseen travelers. Shadows moving along walls, across platforms, or around abandoned staircases are often reported in conjunction with other phenomena. These shadows shift independently of light sources and appear to react to movement, pausing, stretching, or darting away as observers approach. Many witnesses have reported seeing shadowy forms near areas where phantom trains are heard or cold draft are detected, suggesting that these manifestations are interconnected with the station's residual energy. The architecture of old Cincinnati Riverfront Station amplifies these haunting experiences. High ceilings, long corridors, and expansive platforms carry sound in unusual ways, making distant noises appear close and giving echoes an unnatural resonance. Broken windows and boarded-up sections cast deep shadows that seem to move with the observer. Even familiar features of the station the benches, ticket booths, and stairways that take on an otherworldly quality when paired with flickering lights, cold drafts, and distant sounds. Explorers report that the building itself seems to remember the energy of its past, replaying fragments of daily life in the form of visual, auditory, and tactile phenomena. Even during daylight, the abandoned sections carry the weight of history. The energy of countless travelers of farewells, greetings, and hurried arrivalsa appears to linger, manifesting in subtle yet unmistakable ways. Visitors often describe the station as alive with echoes of the past, where the motions of former commuters seem embedded in the walls, floors, and ceilings. The spirits that inhabit these spaces are not hostile. They are remnants of a bygone era, continuing routines long after the tracks have grown silent. In the abandoned areas of old Cincinnati Riverfront Station, shadowy figures move along empty platforms, cold drafts sweep through deserted ticketing halls, and the sound of phantom trains rolls along in used tracks. For those who explore these forgotten spaces, the station is more than an architectural relic. It is a living memory, where the past continues to manifest in sound, temperature, and motion. Here, the ghosts of Cincinnati's rail travelers continue to walk the platforms, invisible yet present, preserving the rhythm of a station that time has abandoned but never forgotten. Old Boston South Station in Massachusetts is a historic rail terminal, once teeming with the clamor of travelers, the squeal of train wheels, and the steady rhythm of daily departures and arrivals. Certain areas, including long-abandoned platforms, hallways, and offices, have been sealed or left in use for decades. It is in these quiet, forgotten spaces that ghostly activity has been reported, creating an atmosphere of lingering history and unexplained occurrences. Witnesses frequently describe seeing ghostly commuters dressed in vintage clothing, hearing footsteps echoing through empty corridors, and doors opening on their own. Investigators have captured shadowy movements in security footage, suggesting that the station retains the presence of those who once walked its halls. Ghostly commuters are among the most commonly reported phenomena. Visitors often describe fleeting glimpses of men and women dressed in early 20th century attire, men in suits and fedoras, women in long skirts and hats, carrying period-appropriate luggage. Visitors often describe fleeting glimpses of men and women dressed in early 20th century attire, men in suits and fedoras, women in long skirts and hats, carrying period-appropriate luggage. One night, a visitor exploring a closed platform reported seeing a group of figures standing near an abandoned bench, appearing to converse quietly before dispersing. As he stepped closer, the figures faded into the darkness, leaving him alone with the hum of silence. Other witnesses have described individuals pacing platforms as if waiting for a train that will never arrive, moving with purpose and poise, their features blurred yet unmistakably human in form. These apparitions often appear and vanish in ways that suggest a residual echo of the stationized past, repeating daily routines from a bygone era. Footsteps echoing in empty corridors are another frequent occurrence. Explorers often report hearing the sound of shoes on tile or wooden floors following them or approaching from unseen directions. In some instances, footsteps mirror the pace of the observer, while in others they seem to come from opposite hallways or stairwells. A security officer recounted patrolling an abandoned section when the sound of hurried steps approached from behind. Turning quickly, he found the corridor completely empty, yet the footsteps continued to echo for several seconds before fading. Audio recordings from investigative teams have documented these footsteps in areas confirmed to be vacant, capturing rhythms and weights consistent with human movement. Doors opening on their own adds another layer of unease to the station as abandoned areas. Visitors have reported doors swinging suddenly, sometimes with enough force to produce a loud creak, even though no one is present. These occurrences often coincide with other phenomena, such as the appearance of ghostly figures or cold drafts, reinforcing the sense that the station is alive with unseen activity. In one account, a late-night explorer approached a long-closed office door when it slowly creaked open without warning. Peering inside, she saw nothing but dust-covered furniture, yet the air felt charged and the impression of a presence lingered. Such experiences are reported repeatedly, creating a pattern of subtle yet persistent manifestations throughout the station. Investigators have captured shadowy movements in security footage, lending visual evidence to the station's reputation. In abandoned hallways, cameras have recorded dark shapes shifting along walls, moving past staircases, or standing momentarily at the end of corridors before disappearing. These shadows often appear without a source of light, reacting to human presence in ways that suggest awareness. Paranormal teams note that the movements frequently coincide with other phenomena, such as the sound of footsteps, cold spots, or doors opening unexpectedly. The footage often leaves a haunting impression, capturing glimpses of activity that cannot be explained by natural causes. Cold spots are frequently reported alongside other unexplained occurrences. Visitors and investigators often describe sudden drops in temperature as they move through deserted waiting areas, stairwells, or corridors. Thermal imaging has revealed isolated pockets of colder air forming and dissipating without ventilation or drafts. Witnesses frequently feel the chill intensify near apparitions, shadowy movements, or moving doors, suggesting that these temperature anomalies are closely tied to the station's paranormal energy. The cold spots add a physical dimension to the haunting, reinforcing the impression of an unseen presence lingering in the space. The architecture of Old Boston South Station amplifies these experiences. High ceilings, long corridors, and expansive platforms carry sound unusually far, making footsteps, voices, or the faint creak of doors seem closer than they are. Broken windows and sealed offices create shadows that shift with the slightest movement of light, while abandoned benches and ticket counters provide reference points for apparitions and phantom activity. The combination of historic design, cavernous space, and minimal modern use in abandoned sections allows the energy of past travelers to linger, producing phenomena that captivate and unsettle those who enter. Even in daytime, the abandoned areas of the station carry an air of memory and history. The echoes of countless travelers are hurrying to catch trains, greeting loved ones, or bidding farewells seem to remain embedded in the walls, floors, and ceilings. Visitors often describe a heightened awareness of Stationized's past, a sense that the building itself preserves fragments of daily life, replaying them for those attentive enough to perceive the residual activity. The spirits here are not aggressive. They continue their routines quietly, existing alongside the modern world, invisible yet undeniably present. In the abandoned wings of Old Boston South Station, ghostly commuters walk platforms, their vintage attire a reminder of an earlier era. Footsteps echo through empty corridors, doors swing open without cause, and shadowy forms appear in security footage. Cold drafts sweep through deserted halls, reinforcing the presence of unseen observers. For those who explore these quiet, historic spaces, the station becomes more than a bodega. It is a living memory, a place where the past continues to coexist with the present. The ghosts of Old Boston South Station remain ever watchful, moving through corridors, pacing platforms, and whispering the echoes of a time when the terminal thrived, preserving the rhythm and energy of countless travelers long gone. Old Milwaukee Depot in Wisconsin is a historic rail terminal that once pulsed with the energy of arriving and departing trains. Its vaulted ceilings, arched windows, and expansive platforms bore witness to countless travelers hurrying to catch trains or greeting loved ones as they disembarked. Today, much of the depot lies abandoned, its platforms silent and waiting rooms empty. Yet visitors continue to report experiences that suggest the station is far from lifeless. Shadowy figures pacing platforms, phantom train sounds, and objects moving inexplicably in abandoned rooms make it clear that the depot carries echoes of its past, lingering in ways that are as eerie as they are fascinating. Witnesses describe dark, humanoid shapes that pace slowly or stand still, appearing as if waiting for trains long gone. The most frequently reported phenomenon involves shadowy figures moving along the platforms. One evening, an urban explorer recounted seeing a figure near the edge of a deserted platform, its posture rigid, as if anticipating an approaching train. As he stepped closer, the figure seemed to dissolve into the shadows, leaving only the echo of its presence. Others had described entire groups of silhouettes gliding along the platform, pausing near benches, or disappearing into walls, all without a sound. These apparitions often seemed to perform the routines of the Dakota-esque operational past, moving with purpose but remaining imperceptible when approached directly. Phantom train sounds are another hallmark of the Dakota-esque haunting. Visitors often hear the unmistakable rumble of train engines, the metallic screech of wheels against rails, and the hissing of brakes on tracks that have long been silent. On several occasions, explorers have reported the sound of a train pulling into a platform, only for nothing to appear on the tracks. One night, a small group of paranormal investigators described hearing a full train sequencia of the distant whistle, the clang of metal doors, and the rhythmic hum of wheelsa while standing in a long-abandoned waiting area. When they moved to investigate, the platforms were empty, yet the sounds had left a lingering sense of presence, as though the station itself remembered its past. Objects moving inexplicably in abandoned rooms add another dimension to the Dakota-esque strange activity. Visitors have described suitcases sliding across floors, chairs tipping over without cause, and papers shifting on counters. One night, a photographer exploring a sealed office reported seeing a suitcase roll across the floor as though pushed by invisible hands. The suitcase stopped abruptly, then shifted again as he approached, leaving him startled and uneasy. Other witnesses have noted doors opening and closing on their own, drawers sliding out without explanation, and benches moving slightly as if brushed by unseen fingers. These subtle movements suggest that the energy of the Dakota-esque past inhabitants continues to interact with the present. Footsteps are a frequent accompaniment to visual and auditory phenomena. Visitors often hear the sound of shoes walking along tile or wooden floors, sometimes following their own rhythm or approaching from adjacent corridors. In some cases, footsteps continue after the witness has stopped moving, fading slowly into silence. Paranormal teams have documented these sounds using audio equipment, capturing distinct rhythms consistent with human movement, despite the complete absence of any living person. The echo of footsteps, combined with other phenomena, creates a tangible sense of presence that can be both unsettling and awe-inspiring. Cold spots are often reported alongside shadowy figures and phantom sounds. Sudden drops in temperature are felt in abandoned offices, along empty platforms, and in deserted corridors, sometimes accompanied by a subtle chill brushing across the skin. Thermal imaging conducted by investigators has revealed isolated pockets of cold air forming and moving in unusual patterns, independent of ventilation or drafts. Visitors often describe the sensation of being watched during these moments, adding a physical dimension to the station-esque spectral activity. The architecture of Old Milwaukee Depot amplifies these haunting experiences. The high ceilings, long platforms, and wide hallways carry sounds in unusual ways, making footsteps, whispers, or distant train noises seem closer than they are. Broken windows, boarded-up offices, and darkened waiting areas create shadows that shift with the slightest change in light. Even the familiar elements of the Dakota benches, ticket counters, staircases take on an otherworldly quality when viewed in the dim glow of flashlights, night vision cameras, or the occasional sunlight filtering through dusty panes. The combination of historic design and long abandonment allows the energy of past travelers to linger, producing phenomena that draw the curious, the brave, and the haunted. Even during the daytime, the abandoned sections of the depot retain an aura of memory. The echoes of countless travelers are hurrying to catch trains, greeting loved ones, or saying goodbye, appear to persist in the walls, floors, and ceilings. Many who explore these spaces describe a sense that the station itself remembers its history, replaying fragments of daily life for those willing to witness it. The spirits present are not aggressive. They seem to continue routines quietly, as if performing their roles long after the Dakota-esque heyday has ended. In the abandoned wings of Old Milwaukee Depot, shadowy figures continue to pace platforms, phantom trains roll along empty tracks, and objects move without explanation. Footsteps echo down corridors, doors open on their own, and cold drafts mark the presence of unseen observers. For those who explore the silent, historic spaces, the depot is more than a bodega. It is a living memory, where the past persists alongside the present. Here, the spirits of travelers and staff linger, performing routines of long-forgotten days, leaving traces in sound, movement, and shadow, preserving the haunting legacy of Old Milwaukee Depot for anyone willing to enter and witness its timeless presence. Old St. Louis Union Station in Missouri stands as a monumental relic of the city's rail history. Once a grand terminal bustling with travelers, conductors, and the constant motion of arriving and departing trains. Much of the station now lies abandoned or underutilized, while the restored sections serve modern purposes. The long-forgotten area has deserted platforms, vacant waiting halls, and sealed corridors have become the focus of ghostly reports. Visitors describe figures standing motionless on platforms, whispers calling their names through empty hallways, and the unmistakable sound of phantom trains arriving where no tracks remain. Many also report sudden cold spots and abrupt drops in temperature, intensifying the eerie atmosphere of this historic site. Shadowy figures are among the most frequently reported phenomena. Witnesses often see individuals standing on abandoned platforms, sometimes in early 20th century attire, appearing as if waiting for a train that will never arrive. One visitor recounted walking along a sealed platform late at night when a man in a dark coat and hat appeared at the far end, gazing down the tracks. As she approached, the figure remained still, then slowly dissipated into the shadows, leaving her with a sense of both wonder and unease. Others have reported seeing groups of figures moving silently along the platform or pausing near old benches and ticket counters, only to vanish when closely observed. The apparitions often mimic the actions of past travelers, suggesting the station itself preserves fragments of daily life from its operational years. Whispers are another hallmark of the station's haunting. Visitors frequently hear their names or indistinct phrases echoing down empty corridors and across deserted platforms. These voices can be startlingly clear or barely audible, drifting through hallways with no apparent source. One paranormal investigator captured an EVP during a late-night exploration, where a voice whispered, "A donut T miss your train," despite there being no active tracks or passengers present. Witnesses often describe the whispers as following them, seeming to originate from corners or ceilings, then fading abruptly. The effect is a disorienting sensation, as if the station itself is reaching out, reminding visitors that they are not truly alone. Phantom train arrivals are another common experience. Visitors report hearing the rhythmic clatter of wheels on rails, the hiss of brakes, and the faint whistle of an approaching locomotive. These sounds are particularly striking because they occur in areas where no active tracks exist. On multiple occasions, explorers have described standing on a long-abandoned platform when the sound of train grew steadily louder, complete with the echo of metal doors closing. When they rushed to the source, no train appeared. The phantom arrivals often leave a lingering sense of presence, as though the station is replaying moments of its past activity. For anyone patient enough to witness them, cold spots and sudden drops in temperature frequently accompany other paranormal phenomena. Visitors often report chills as they enter abandoned waiting areas or step onto deserted platforms, sometimes feeling the cold concentrated around figures or objects that appear to move on their own. Thermal imaging used by investigative teams has revealed isolated pockets of cold air forming in areas with no ventilation, moving slowly through hallways and across platforms. Many explorers describe an almost tangible presence during these moments, a sensation of being observed by unseen eyes. The temperature anomalies lend a physical dimension to the station's haunting, reinforcing the reality of the phenomena. Footsteps are also commonly experienced, echoing through corridors, stairwells, and platform areas. Visitors frequently hear the sound of shoes moving along floors, sometimes matching their own pace or approaching from unseen directions. In some instances, the footsteps continue after the observer has stopped walking, fading gradually as if receding into the structure itself. Paranormal teams have captured these sounds on audio equipment, documenting distinct rhythms consistent with human movement despite the absence of anyone present. The combination of footsteps with ghostly figures and phantom trains contributes to a vivid, immersive sense of history still inhabiting the station. The architecture of Old St. Louis Union Station amplifies these experiences. Its high-vaulted ceilings, long corridors, and expansive platforms carry sound and shadow unusually far, making footsteps, whispers, or distant train noises seem startlingly close. Broken windows, abandoned offices, and sealed waiting areas create pockets of darkness, allowing shadows to appear and shift with the slightest change in light. Even the familiar features of the station, the benches, ticket counters, and staircases, take on an otherworldly quality when paired with cold drafts and flickering lights. The historic design and long abandonment create the perfect environment for lingering energy, preserving the essence of past travelers and staff. Even during daylight, the station retains an aura of history and memory. The echoes of countless travelers of farewells, greetings, and hurried steps appear embedded in the walls, floors, and ceilings. Visitors often report a strong sense that the building itself remembers its past, replaying fragments of daily life through sight, sound, and sensation. The spirits seem largely benign, continuing their routines quietly, a spectral reminder of the station's once bustling energy. In the abandoned wings of Old St. Louis Union Station, figures still stand on deserted platforms. Whispers call out names, and phantom trains arrive where no tracks exist. Cold spots mark the presence of unseen entities. Footsteps echo along empty corridors, and shadows shift independently of light. For those exploring these forgotten spaces, the station becomes more than a buildinga. It is a living memory, a place where the past persists alongside the present. Here, the ghosts of travelers and staff continue their routines, their presence lingering in sound, movement, and temperature, preserving the haunting legacy of Old St. Louis Union Station for anyone willing to witness it. Abandoned train stations are more than relics of a bygone era. They are crossroads between the living and the departed. These 25